Hey guys, Sean here. Welcome to the F1 Word and to some British Grand Prix race reaction. Qualifying yesterday was fantastic. That race was absolutely brilliant. What a fantastic Grand Prix. I'm going to say it right off the start. I know that maybe there's a bit of recency bias because it's just happened, but I think got to be up there as, if not the race of the season, one of the best. I mean, Canada was fantastic as well, wasn't it? So what a race, and what a result as well, a surprise result in many ways when you look at how the season has gone, or the last few years has gone. We'll get into that in just a moment. Hope you're having a good Sunday and enjoyed that one. It was a cracker. I warned you yesterday it'd be good, and it was good. Thoroughly enjoyed that one. So yeah, hope you're having a great time this Sunday. Enjoyed that race. Don't forget to vote on the poll. As always, by the way, rate the British Grand Prix. 83% of you are saying great, 14% good, 2% average okay, and 1% are trolling with bad, because that was not a bad race, and you're crackers if you think it was. I'm sorry. I wouldn't always say that, but it's true. Brilliant. And yes, please do leave a like. Leave a like for a great race. Not for me, not for Stuart, but for a great race. It was, more of that, please. And it's got me excited now. Already was for this season. Things have closed up. Things are interesting at the front now, interesting throughout the field. And if we can keep this up this season and into 2025, it's going to be great. Ready for the 2026 reset. I won't be negative. Jonty's already told me off for that on DMs for going straight to the negative, but you know, it's a point to make. But anyway, let's jump straight into this and say a very good evening to Stuart. I suspect you may have enjoyed that one, Stuart. That was a cracker.
What a brilliant race that was. I enjoyed that from start to finish. That was really good. A great race, great weekend. And honestly, what a great season we've got on our hands. Didn't think that at the beginning, but wow, I'm kind of on the edge of my seat for the rest of the year now.
Is that 6 different winners in 12 races? Something like that?
Yeah.
Not bad considering we called the championship after about 2 races, is it really, when you think about it? We're not getting into that today, but yeah, just absolutely unreal. How did you vote in the poll? I actually went onto my other account for the first time ever and voted great for that one because I thought that was a cracker. I keep saying cracker. I like saying cracker.
Yeah, I also voted great. Really good fun. A little sprinkling of weather always gives us a treat, but solidly 3 teams there fighting for the win. The balance of power swung back and forth several times throughout that race. We even had a little bit of Sainz nibbling at the heels at one point. So I loved every minute of that. Strategy was nail-bitingly tight. Wasn't really sure who's going to win at any point of that race. It really was a kind of, it wasn't a lottery because people were working hard for it, but it really was a kind of don't place any bets too hard at any point kind of race.
Even towards the end, it wasn't a dead cert, was it? There was always that threat the tyres might fall away or that something might happen. So yeah, great race. But we're going to get into we'll run through the teams we always do. We'll do the top 3, then we'll do what I'm going to call the middle 4 today for teams, and then we'll do the rest, which won't take long, I can assure you. One of those races, I'm afraid, if you're a fan like Pascal, for example, who's a Sauber fan, not many notes on teams like that because all the focus was at the front, as I'm sure you'll understand, but I'll try and pull some press releases at some point. But we will start for the second weekend in a row, by the way, with Mercedes, but for the first time in 56 races and since the 2021 Saudi Arabian Grand Prix, we're starting with Lewis Hamilton. He is a race winner, race win number 104 at the British Grand Prix. Before I say anything else, Stuart, and look at the notes, I've got to say, I'm so happy for him because it's been so long since his last win. It's his last season with Mercedes. It's just so fitting when you look at all the races he's won at Silverstone for the team, everything he's done with the team and they've done with him to do it at Silverstone. If this is, and I hope for Lewis Hamilton fans' sake, it isn't, but if this is his last win for Mercedes, then what a place to do it. And I hope there's more to come this year, but I'm just really happy for him. He was very emotional as well, wasn't he? You don't tend to see Hamilton get teary in that way.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I'm absolutely made up for him just as a driver. I'm really glad we don't know what the future holds for him, but I was getting worried that actually maybe we wouldn't see another win for him and he'd have some good races and some bad races but never quite have the car to be able to deliver what he did in his absolute peak. And I'm really glad he got to have this day and in front of the British crowd and to have a nice, send off for Mercedes in his final season. But there may be more wins to come. Mercedes have clearly stepped it up a gear, but to hear just how much this meant to him. We know how hard the last couple of years have been for him. And he said afterwards that, there were times when he started to disbelieve in himself that maybe he couldn't win again. Maybe he wasn't as strong as he was. So to be able to have this moment in front of like his biggest crowd of fans was really lovely to see, and well earned. Like he raced as hard as he possibly could that entire race, made the right calls, and held off Max Verstappen. So we are going back 2.5 seasons for that kind of narrative again.
Yeah, thank you for your super chats, by the way. Taylor Peck and Jonathan A, thank you very much. Taylor Peck says, get in there, Lewis. Yeah, it was good to see Bono up on the podium, actually, quite a moment as well. And Jonathan A says, hearing you say it is making it even more real. Thank you so much for your super chats and your support there. I expect we'll see Ruby at some point in chat. Probably still dancing, I'd imagine, but I'm sure she'll be here at some point. But yeah, no, I mean, just a brilliant drive when you look at everything going on in that race. I mean, first off, I think good team play. Do you think off the line from Mercedes, sort of tucking in behind George Russell rather than risking sort of a 2 cars side by side into turn 1, bit of chaos? So I think a good move there on the team stuff. So that was great. Caught Russell on lap 18 as the race started to fall. Was right on his gearbox and took the lead on the run to turn 15 on lap 18. Pitted on lap 27 for intermediates, but the tyres were falling apart by lap 32, which was a concern, obviously. But it sort of at that point, Mercedes, prior to the rain falling, looked like they had everything under control. And then the rain came and suddenly McLaren, out of nowhere, were suddenly the quickest guys out there comfortably. And then before you knew it, George Russell slipping through the pack and it's all going wrong around pit stops and it's swinging all over the place. And it was just absolutely crazy. So he's done well to deal with all of that. And then just very quickly on the last of my notes, end of lap 36, he was within 2 seconds of Norris ahead, pitted on lap 38 for the softs, and then on lap 40 he'd undercut Norris to take the lead. 56 race winner streak over. That was the, I think prior to that Hamilton had the pace to take the fight to Norris at the front, but I think that's, we'll get to McLaren in a bit, but Lando staying out the extra lap, taking the soft tyre, that was the moment, Hamilton pitting out a lap earlier that really made the difference. That kind of decided the race, I guess, at that point, although again, we'll not know. Hamilton may have caught him anyway, but that was the moment, wasn't it? Or the big moment that McLaren seemed focused on.
Yeah, and I think we'll get to this. Kind of those laps are kind of the strategy story of the race, really. I think Hamilton pitted at just the right time to when the dry tires were the right tire to be on, got that undercut, had a much faster pit stop. Norris overshot his box a little bit and just managed to get that position back and crucially managed to make those soft tires work in the final stint for as long as he did. They definitely weren't lasting as long as Pirelli had projected they would. Pirelli, if you look at their pre-race strategy guide, had said you could switch onto the soft tires as early as lap 36, which I think they would have been really struggling at the end if they'd gone that early on. Lap 38, I think, is when they eventually switched over by kind of they had to, really. Yeah, I missed what you said at the beginning there. I've already forgotten, but yeah, that's what I got about that point.
Yeah, no, I was just saying, I think at the very start itself, that start to the race, I think Hamilton tucking behind Russell was sensible rather than, I think it feels like something that would have been discussed before the race. There's no point, especially given that, yes, that Mercedes have made this step forward, but they're not going to quite know where they are yet. There's still a lot of ifs and buts about whether this is genuine or not. It feels like it is now because this is, last few races have been really strong for them, but I feel like it's a sensible thing to do just to make sure you get 2 cars through that first lap and then sort of let the race unfold from there was kind of my point on that, really.
Yeah, and I think this is something we've seen in the last few races now that the teams have kind of got up to. Like I say, I think they're basically up to Red Bull's level in terms of performance and pace, there or thereabouts. But we have seen, teams kind of lose pace with Max Verstappen by kind of fighting amongst themselves and not working together as a team. And we've spoken about this on a couple of race reactions about how they just need to kind of focus on pushing forwards together to maximize the race, and they did work well. They didn't seem to be getting in each other's way. They as you said, choreographed the start, and then only, I think, when Hamilton felt assured he could get past without it being too much of a fuss, did he make that move on lap 18, which was a great move. Built up to it through Maggots and Beckett's and took him in Stowe. We saw quite a lot of moves through Stowe, and I think most of those moves were pretty confident when 2 cars were had just enough far apart in pace for it not to be too precarious, I'd say. Managed beautifully, I think. It's a real shame Russell wasn't able to make his race work in the end for various reasons, which we'll get to. But from Hamilton's side of the garage, kind of a perfect race. Had to manage, as you kind of mentioned, that middle period when the first rain moved over, but it never quite reached wet tire stages. So they all had to kind of dance in those when the lap times dropped down to about 1:38, and they were like, what, 5 or 6 laps when they just had to dry tire their way through that period. And clearly McLaren were the strongest in that period, but Mercedes were able to kind of work their way back again as the conditions changed.
Obviously, there's no rain in that sort of the first stint. But in some ways, the first stint felt a little bit like the middle stint. They weren't trying to keep it on the track, obviously, because there was no rain. But we saw that first sort of, I think that sort of 10, 12 laps before the rain fell, there was a lot of management going on with the tyres, because I think everyone was a little bit reluctant to put in an early stop and then have to potentially pit a lap or two later, for instance, because they weren't quite sure what the weather was going to do. So actually, whilst the race itself overall was incredible, I would say that first 10 laps, once the first lap was out of the way, it all did seem to settle down much more quickly than F1 races tend to, because they've got that tyre management. But when you look at how the race unfolded, that's quite a critical phase of the race. I think a lot of drivers did the right thing there, definitely. Just a couple of points from chat as well, by the way. T.Guna, thank you very much for your super chat. Says, rain races always deliver and we need more tracks like Silverstone. Happy for Lewis, but I feel McLaren didn't do Oscar any favours. We'll get to that. Thank you very much for the support, mate. I really appreciate that. I also saw... where was it? I saw... Katsu says 9 wins on the same track is insane. So it's his 9th win at Silverstone as well, which Crofty made perfectly clear as he screamed in my ear. I appreciate that one. And Kaori says not going on the meters was the nail in the coffin for McLaren. We will get to McLaren, I promise you that, in just a few minutes. But yeah, there was one... I suppose actually, Stuart, the whole race was hairy at times, wasn't it, with the weather? But there was one very hairy moment for Mercedes, with Lewis Hamilton going straight on across the first corner on lap. Where I've got it written down here somewhere. Lap. Did I write it down? I don't think I did. No, but it was at some point in the race.
19.
19.
Lap
there
19.
We go. Thank you.
They both went kind of off, didn't they?
Yeah,
is that what you mean?
He went straight on, and Russell sort of followed him. It reminded me. Not the same outcome and not the same situation, but it reminded me a little bit of Schumacher and Barrichello at Ferrari in 2001 at Malaysia, when both of them were looking good, then they just suddenly were off track straight across the gravel. It sort of reminded me a bit of that, obviously, into the runoff. So that was a hairy moment. That actually cost George Russell the place to Norris, but Norris was already been pretty quick at that stage anyway. So but on just congratulations to Lewis, first of all. I'm sure his fans are delighted. Lots of positivity in the chat from Lewis Hamilton fans, so that's good to see. So congratulations to him and Mercedes. Did you find out, Stuart? You messaged me. Did you find out when was the last time we had 2 non-Red Bull wins in a row?
Yeah, Austria 2022 was Ferrari's second race in a row. So that was the last time a team other than Red Bull have got 2 wins in a row. Incredibly.
Years.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, basically, 2 years. So, yeah, big congratulations to them. And who, beginning of the season, I don't think we'd have predicted Mercedes would have had back-to-back wins. I know a little bit of fortune came their way last weekend, but that happens sometimes too.
Yeah, absolutely. And that today was, I think, all their own doing, wasn't it? Just great driving. And I think, just very, very quickly as well, before we get to Russell, another example, I like to bang this drum, another example of how in these conditions, experience is so important sometimes. Even Lando Norris says in his post-race interview with Sky that, not getting the feel for the tyres at the right time and knowing when to make the switch, that's the sort of thing that you gain from... I don't know how many it is now, however many races Lewis Hamilton's been in F1 since 2007, of course. So that's such an important part of these sorts of conditions. But congratulations to Lewis and to Mercedes. George Russell. I'm not a massive fan of George Russell. I may have mentioned it. I don't dislike the guy, but I'm not a huge fan. But I really feel for him. So I'm really happy for Lewis Hamilton today, but I really feel for George Russell. Got off the line well, like I said, good team play. Pitted for instance on lap 27, the right time to make that move. Double stack behind Hamilton. Lost a little bit of time, but not too much because he was able to back off a bit and it wasn't an absolute disaster. Was racing nicely. Looked like he had a shot at the win, and then on lap 33 was called into the pits and told to retire the car. A problem with the water system, which again Sky Commentary pointed out was massively ironic, given all the water around, that George Russell was struggling with water issues. But it was a water issue, a water system issue, and it was game over. Which I know he'd fallen back after the pit stops, and as the weather started to come, Hamilton had kind of found more speed and got past him. Then he'd fallen behind the McLarens as well, but he'd been racing well up to that point. So I do feel for him, and I think today, looking at how the race unfolded, he'd have had a shot at being on that podium. So I'm a bit disappointed for him. But unfortunately, he got the luck last weekend in Austria, didn't get it this weekend, and that's just the way it goes in Formula One sometimes.
Yeah, it's a massive shame for him, really. He was having such a good weekend. Nipped pole yesterday. I mean, who knows how the rest of his race would have gone. He was catching Verstappen before he was forced to retire in that. It was in the interphase, wasn't it? It was a few laps before they started the Inters were reaching the end of their life. He was having a good race. Hamilton passing him meant he was second in line for pit stop. So lost a bit of time, and actually that little bit of lost time in the stack is what lost him position to Verstappen in the first place. So he could have well been lined up for the win there. Could have been fighting out with the Verstappen and the McLarens and Lewis there, and the race end might have been a bit different, or Lewis, whichever way around they would have been at the end, might have had a bit more of a buffer to Verstappen or something. It's hard to say, but yeah, I think a really good result was taken away from him for no fault of his own. I think he had a really, really good race otherwise, and him being fourth at the time of his retirement was more just circumstance than him actually being kind of fourth best driver at that time. Yeah, no, I think he's been having a great season, a solid time really, and this could have demonstrates. I think he easily could have won this weekend as much as Lewis could have.
Yeah, Josh says a shot at the win. You mean ? I'm not. I suppose, yeah. I mean, shot at the podium, shot at the win. It was still top three, isn't it? But I think the experience that Hamilton had, the pace he had, might have been a bit too much. But he'd have had, I suppose, if he had a shot, is I guess a fair point there. But I'd definitely top three. I think he'd have been in the mix for. Thank you very much to Punky Pink 83, aka Emily, who I've not seen for ages. I hope you're well, Emily. Good to see you. He says, what a day, it's been too long coming. 3 purple hearts. Thank you very much for your super chat, Emily. Hope you're well. It's been a while. Or it feels like it's been a while. It may have been last week. I don't know. My memory's not the best, as I'm sure you know. And Jonathan says, you've got to be there when the look falls your way, Sean. Laughing emoji, of course. And Kaori says, Lewis passed George at the perfect time. That's about right, I would say. Obviously, if George is out front, he gets first call on the pit stop, doesn't he, as well? So that might cost Lewis some time. But obviously, ultimately, George had to retire, which, again, like you say, Stuart, not his fault. But overall, really great weekend for not just Mercedes, but for George Russell as well. And I think, we've had some false dawns from Mercedes over the last couple of years. This feels different now, because even with those false dawns, they didn't win back-to-back Grand Prix, did they? So it does feel like they're maybe not the fastest, but they're definitely now in that mix with McLaren and Red Bull. And maybe some weekends like Austria, they'll need a little bit of luck, or for the weather to work their way if they're going to be winning the race. But they feel like they're in that mix now, and we might see 3 cars fighting at the front. And hey, maybe if Ferrari pull their finger out their backside, maybe they'll be up there too one day. Who knows?
Yeah, I mean, I very much agree with that. I don't think, they're up there with McLaren and Red Bull just yet, but they're in that position where if it's the right kind of track, if it's the right kind of circumstances, they're there and they're able to steal a win or earn a win. So we'll see how this plays out across the rest of the season, but they must be really happy with where they've gotten that car from where they were, and hopefully they can build on this. And now I think Ferrari are going to have to be worried that they sort of missed their window and they're now kind of slipping behind 3 teams instead of being up there fighting fighting Red Bull, which is where they sort of expected to be at the start of the season. So yeah, really, really good work from that team. I think they are looking hopefully pretty sharp for the rest of the season. Having basically 4 teams in the mix at the front is incredibly exciting from my point of view, and having as many people having a shot at the wins and podiums and pole positions is all good by me.
Yeah, I do my predictions for a preview on a Thursday, and they're terrible, but I keep trying to explain to people that's a good thing. It shouldn't be predictable. We don't want it predictable. So, it doesn't help that I'm terrible at predictions generally, obviously, but, that's a completely different conversation. But, yeah, good stuff from George all weekend. Just a shame with the water. There's a lot of emotion at Mercedes. The impromptu singing to Sweet Caroline. Oh, how British. Just happens, doesn't it? Second place today, Max Verstappen. Overtook Norris on lap 1, turn 5 for P3. Pitted again. He pitted at the right time for Inters. Really didn't need the lap 26. So that was good. And that helped him jump Russell because he got them on a lap earlier than George did. Did say after lap 31, the tyres are degrading a lot. Pitted for hards on lap 38. Overtook Norris at lap on lap 48, sorry, at turn 15 for P2. I'm going to call that, by the way, and let me finish before everyone gets mad at me. That move on Lando Norris as one of the greatest overtakes of all time, an absolutely amazing move. Because the way, the way I'm going to word this, Stuart, but the way that Crofty creamed himself over Norris making a DRS overtake over Max Verstappen, I feel like at those low standards, that was one of the greatest moves of all time. So there is a lot of sarcasm in there. I do apologise, but the bias over Skycoms this weekend was quite funny. But anyway, yes. But Max Verstappen, second place today. Quite an interesting race, actually, thinking of Max's Grand Prix, because he didn't seem to have the pace in that first stint, or for much of it, actually, to be fair. And then we got to the final phase. He put the hard tyre on. They didn't have any new mediums, so they put the hard on. They didn't want to go near the soft, which was understandable, as we saw with others who struggled on it. And then his pace just kind of clicked. He was so quick in the final stage of the race, and he was catching Norris really, really quickly. Got past, like I say, on lap 48, and then was closing the gap by a tenth here, a tenth there. And Hamilton managed his tyres obviously well, probably thinking about the charging for Verstappen potentially, and got within, where was he? At 1.4 seconds off the lead. I will caveat that with Hamilton did slow over the line like drivers do in the win, so maybe there's a few extra tenths, half a second maybe, would have been a bit further away had he been full speed across the line. But he didn't look like he had a chance of winning that race until the final stint, when actually, like I said, towards the start, it felt like you couldn't quite bank on the win for Lewis until he got over the line, because Max was closing in fairly quickly, but not as rapidly as he did on the McLaren, which was interesting. So do you think, again, that experience of Hamilton managing the tyres where he needed to, knowing that possibly Verstappen on some better quality or condition tyres was going to close him down towards the end, maybe? Difficult to know, I know, but
it's very difficult to know. I think possibly, I don't know. Verstappen's in a very, very strange one today. I will say, before the start of the race, I turned to my friend who I was watching with, and I was like, it's a British crowd, top three on the grid are British, and yet why do I feel like Verstappen's going to steal this? Because he looked strong. He made a mistake in qualifying that kind of put him on the back foot for the entire hour, essentially. He did well to get fourth with the damage he had. And I feel like if it had been a kind of a normal condition race, sunny all the way through, maybe he could have pushed his way through. But every time the conditions got kind of changing, he struggled quite a bit. He made an amazing move at the start around the outside of loop, essentially on Piastri. Piastri. Yes. Up to there. Yes. Which was kind of crucial. But then as soon as it started to get drizzly, he didn't seem to be coping well. There are a lot of times when he didn't seem to be coping well, but held on just enough to pull himself back together during those crucial final bits on the intermediate, and making that stop at first making the stop onto Inters at exactly the right time, and then stop back onto dries at exactly the right time. He can really feel the car and make the calls in the way that some of the other drivers are not, which we'll definitely, I think, be talking about when we get to McLaren. And that's that final stint. It's really hard to know how that would play out if things were slightly different. He was definitely incredibly strong there, and I think the win was very open for him to take if circumstances were very slightly different. So he's still, I think, by a distance as a driver, a tour de force compared to other people right now.
Yeah, in these sorts of conditions, these kind of races, the cream tends to rise to the top, doesn't it, as well? So, not to say that anyone down the back of the grid isn't a good driver, I should say, but, I'm not going to start comparing Lewis Hamilton to, I don't know, Zhou Guan Yu. He's last. There we go. Max probably had his car set up for dry most. He says Kevin. That's possible, yeah. Katsu says win for Verstappen would have been funny. The Hatpro said, I absolutely think that Hamilton had the gap managed. And I saw one other that was about, there it is, alumni kid says, RB tends to fall off the longer the tyres are on. So there we go, some stuff from chat there. Alice, thank you very much for your super chat and your support. Says, and it's a stat that I had to double check because it caught me off guard, so I can see why it's blowing your mind. 8 teams in the top 10 come the end of that race.
Very cool. Very cool.
Very excited for the rest of the season. But yeah, well done to Max. The most important thing for Max Verstappen today, I guess you could argue. I know he wants to win races, but he's extended his championship lead again today. So, that's the most important thing for him today. Again, somehow, just it's again, best drivers. You look at Michael Schumacher used to do it. He'd have a bad weekend, he'd still somehow manage to extend his championship lead. Or Hamilton used to do it, didn't he, when he was more dominant? And the best just seemed to do that. So there you go.
Yeah, I think Verstappen said after the race, we had a bad day and we finished second. Not many teams can do that, which I think sums it up.
I wish my bad days were as good as that, just generally speaking. On the other side of the garage, Sergio Perez, P17 today. Took a gamble on the Inters, didn't pay off initially. More rain was expected. The rain did come, but he burnt through those intermediates, so he had to pit anyway again to change them, so it was a wasted pit stop. Also, left rear was slow going on at that stop, so that was a 5.9 second costing. And I've put here, his old Inters were finished and balding, much like me. So there we go. So I think just a very disappointing race for Sergio, but a disappointing weekend. The only thing I can really talk about is how I'm not going to criticise a driver or a team for taking a gamble in those kind of conditions on the Inters. I think that's, if you are that far down the back of the grid in a quicker car, it's got to be worth a risk in case you suddenly get a massive deluge and you're on the right tyre. And you can, like we saw in Zandvoort a little bit, was it last year or a year before, when tyres were, people were trying the dries on the wet track and then people coming in and others weren't, and the time he was gaining. I think Perez led that race actually for a while through all of that, so it was the right thing to try. But they had to try it because he was so far out of position because of his mistake in qualifying. So it's sort of one of those things where I'm not going to go in hard on the attempt to try something different, but he shouldn't have been down there in the first place. And Jenson Button really... I'd love to talk about Perez's race properly. That's why I'm sort of moving on to what Jenson Button said. But I mean, what is there to say? Really, there's not a lot to say. So Jenson Button said after the race on Sky something along the lines of, people aren't talking about a mid-season driver swap, but he's going to have to find some form soon, because otherwise they're going to have to get him out of that car and put somebody else in there, because this run's going on too long now. You can let it go for one or two races because it happens in Formula 1. Drivers have bad runs, but this is the second year in a row he's done it at this stage of the season. And McLaren, despite the fact Verstappen finished second, McLaren outscored Red Bull in the Constructors pretty solidly, actually. 18 points to, 27? So that's a big chunk taken away. So they're going to have to make a decision soon, Red Bull. They can't keep just going, well, he's got a contract, we'll see what happens. It's not good enough from Checo. And again, it's not so much on today's race, just in general the weekend. He shouldn't have been down there in the first place to have to make that gamble. And if the gamble pays off, Stuart, we're having a different conversation, aren't we? But it didn't. And I'm very disappointed in where Checo is. And I try my best to defend him, but I can't keep doing that. It's not fair. It's not balanced.
No, you're absolutely right. And this is not where the second driver in what is possibly the best car of the grid should be. And crucially, Red Bull have started making noises that are more aligned with maybe we'll replace him.
Yeah.
I think, Christian Horner said we thought this contract would improve things, and just that kind of, normally they'll be defending the driver and so now they're sort of making little jabs, little signs that maybe they can start pulling out performance contract, or God knows what they did. We know Red Bull have been prone to just getting whatever the contract situation is, doing whatever they need to do, and I think now they're not the runaway constructor. They definitely need to be getting points from both of those cars right now. And I don't know how long it's going to take for Perez to get out of that slump. And, you can have bad days, you can have bad qualifyings, you can have a mistake here and there, or just a bit of bad luck. But when you have a run like this, like he did last year, it's all kind of pointing towards one driver. And you could, if this race was in isolation, you'd be like, well, Perez made a mistake in qualifying, but Max Verstappen made basically the same mistake in qualifying, and Perez just happened to run a little bit wider onto the gravel and get stuck. Max was a little bit luckier there. But when we're sort of seeing it weekend after weekend and just not being able to get anything from it, he should be up there. He should have made his way up through the field. Perhaps Red Bull were sort of using him to just be a sort of like tire tester to be able to know exactly when the time was to switch over to other tires. But during the race, I was thinking that they stuck him like Leclerc. Really, they stuck him on the intermediates in that first rainy phase when it was the wrong call. Didn't bring him in again to change back to dry tires when they should have. And actually, by the time it got wet again, if they were keeping him out as a tester, he'd wrecked his intermediates so much on dry conditions that there was no information to tell anyway. So it just essentially wrecked 10 laps of his race. They started him on the hards, which was a weird thing to do when you knew rain was coming and they'd have to switch over at some point. It was just a very strange race all round, and he was on the wrong tire long periods of the race, not really doing anything. Finished 17th, stopped 4 times, once 3 from the air. Just messy race, messy qualifying. I don't know what they're going to do with him. And as we said last weekend, the constructors is possibly under threat if McLaren continue to be just a strong force, delivering high points positions, wins, podiums from here on out. There's a whole half a season left to go. This is race 12 of 24.
Yeah, I mean, the conversation seems to be about 2025 rather than a mid-season change. But I completely agree with Jensen Button. They can't. If he can turn it around in Hungary and Belgium, then maybe see how he comes back after the summer break at Zandvoort. But if he doesn't, they're going to have to make a change. A lot of people, I often have it, people argue that Red Bull don't care about the constructors, but those same people then tell me that the reason they keep Perez is for the money. Well, then they obviously do care about the constructors and money, because that's where the money's paid out. So, of course they care about it. They're a team at the end of the day. They want Max to win the Drivers' Championship, but they still want to win the constructors. They're not going to do that if Max is not... Because you look at today, you look at that start from Mercedes, Hamilton and Russell working together to keep that 1 and 2. You look at the times this season, not so much today, I guess, but the opportunities that would have been there in a dry race, for example, for McLaren with Piastri up there with Norris. Verstappen doesn't have that defence. So in a field that's so much closer, suddenly, when you've got one driver up against 2 and 2 from 2 different teams, it's just constantly vulnerable. So Red Bull will have to make a change. The problem is, the change that seems to be the rumour is one that confuses me even more, Stuart. I didn't want to get into this too much right now, but I'm gonna. The rumour is that Daniel Ricciardo will be the one that takes that seat, and then Liam Lawson will take a seat at RB. But and I read in the rumour mill that the phrase that still baffles me is Ricciardo's sudden upturn in form. Really? I've not seen anything. He's had a great in Canada. Fantastic weekend in Canada, did all right last time out, but this weekend lost out again to Tsunoda. I mean, my argument would be, if Perez is not going to deliver at Red Bull, he's probably not going to want to be an RB. If they decide they are going to cut the contract at the summer break, surely for now you put Tsunoda in that car alongside Verstappen, and you put Lawson alongside Ricciardo, and then you've got a direct comparison. You've got Ricciardo versus Lawson for a potential seat at Red Bull, and then you give Tsunoda an opportunity because he's been in that midfield and towards the back end of the field, one of the best drivers on the grid, sort of in that mix of, up there with Hulkenberg, I think, at the moment with his form. So I'm not quite sure why, and it's not anti-Ricciardo. Some people think I hate Daniel Ricciardo, but I don't. It's just I don't think he's doing enough to warrant a spot at Red Bull when you've got Yuki Tsunoda doing such a good job in the other car. So they're going to have to make a decision, but I don't think they can wait for 2025. Because I think McLaren have got a genuine shot at this Constructors' Championship this year if they stick with Perez. I know they want a number 2, by the way, but you still need your number 2 driver to be up there, don't you?
No, I completely agree. And, I mean, I'm not... I don't want to be seen like I'm jumping the gun, but there is a chance, as we move into the second half of the season, that McLaren will be the team to beat. If they're developing that car well, it's having a good uptick in form, and they I think quite probably maybe have the strongest car, and it's just because Max is in the Red Bull that you're sort of seeing Max deliver better. But if they just develop a little further, McLaren could be the strongest car. They could be getting 1-2s, 1-3s, 2-4s, in quite a lot of races from here on out, and could easily close that gap up to Red Bull if Perez isn't able to deliver high points. So I think McLaren, I think Red Bull have got themselves into the problem of where they were, was it 2018 to 2020, that kind of time, when they just could not find a second driver that worked for them. And sure, they might temporarily move Ricciardo up to their elevate Lawson to give him a bit of time before 2025, or maybe move Tsunoda up, whatever it is they're doing. But I don't think I think Perez was their plan for that seat. It didn't work, and now they're going to be left flailing. Whatever they do, keep Perez, replace Perez with a junior. I don't know. They haven't got a solid plan. I don't know why they didn't jump at Sainz. We've said this many, many times. What an easy decision I think that would have been. But yeah, I totally agree with you. I think they're in a really weird position now where they're going to be left vulnerable in the constructors if Perez doesn't pull himself together.
Yeah, just to make the point again, people said yesterday when we were discussing Perez that Red Bull don't want a driver to challenge Max, and I absolutely agree. They want a driver that is second driver, but you still need that second driver to be picking up points. That's still their job. So I think this is going to be interesting. I think this, and I don't. Again, we're going to stop on this and get onto McLaren now, but I do just want to say I think there is a little bit of a. Go back a few years now, I know, and I get that, but there is a little bit here of. There was always the potential for this to become a problem, this bottleneck, when they put Perez in the car for 21. It was the right decision. Perez had a great 2020. It was absolutely the right decision to put him in that car for 2021. But looking back with all of these years of hindsight, that's possibly what's causing a bottleneck there. But then they go and stick Ricciardo in the RB last year, which also contributes to that. So they've made some great decisions with their driver swaps sometimes. I think Red Bull, sometimes they've got it wrong, sometimes they've got it bang on. This could be interesting, but something to keep an eye on to the summer break. I did just want to say, a couple of people in chat asking some questions, but I'll just say to Michael Gotts, says, rumours of Ocon to Williams after season break with Sargeant out of Williams and doing in the Alpine. If you're still here later, Michael, remind me when we get to Q&A at the end of the stream, because then we'll try and answer that then. But I think that rumour is an interesting one, because Ocon's supposed to go into Haas next year. That deal is apparently done and signed and will be announced soon. So I'm not quite sure why Williams will put Ocon in the car for 6 months if he's then going to go to Haas next year. So we'll get into that later if we can get onto it. But it's, but overall, poor weekend for Perez. I feel a little bit for him. Because he was, you go wide, a bit of a snap in the damp conditions in qualifying. You go onto all that runoff that's all soaking wet. Your car's either going to spin or you're going to go straight on. But there were other drivers who made the same mistake, including Verstappen and, funnily enough, Daniel Ricciardo, who didn't spin. So there you go. But a bit unlucky there, I guess you could say. So I'm still not sure why Sainz is in the mix. A few people mentioned about the parents' argument, but I'll repeat what I said yesterday in the qualifying watch along. If the reason for not putting Sainz in that Red Bull is because Jos Verstappen and Carlos Sainz Sr. can't get on, then you kick him out of the garage and tell them to grow up and go away. It's about their sons, not them. Would be my argument to that one. So there we go. Should we talk about McLaren? That took a little bit of a ramble, didn't it, on Sergio Perez? Lando Norris today, P3, Oscar Piastri in P4. Quite a lot of notes on McLaren. Lando Norris dropped behind Verstappen early on. Seemed to struggle initially to switch on those tyres, which I think they said in commentary as well. Found pace after a couple of laps and overtook Verstappen for P3 on lap 15. And again, this is the point I was making on Crofty. Great overtaking / racing, according to Crofty, when the fact is it was a DRS overtake and Max didn't exactly fight it, and Lando didn't really fight the overtake back, did he, later in the race? I won't repeat what I put after I put get a grip, because it's not a very nice word. Norris not happy on the radio, the Mercedes, saying the Mercedes rejoined unsafely. I don't think that was particularly unsafe. They could have thrown it straight back on the track, but at least they waited for a bit of space to get on rather than throwing it over the curb like we saw in F2 at a different corner and going airborne. So I'm not sure on that one. Past Russell after the Mercedes rejoined, because Russell was really struggling at that point, but the McLaren really switched on in the wet conditions. Lap 27, pitted for Inters, and the team chose to leave Piastri out. I've written here, of course they did. Norris pitted on lap 39 for softs as well, but went long in his box to so a 4.5 second pit stop. That cost him the lead. The big question mark, though, is should he have gone onto the medium tyres? They had the fresh mediums, and my notes on that point really, Stuart, are he waited a lap longer, which he shouldn't have done, which he said himself in his post-race interview was on him, and the wrong tyre was also a factor. They went for the soft tyre, despite the fact they had the fresh mediums, and Oscar Piastri said a few laps prior to that the mediums were definitely the best tyre to be on, before he'd even switched. So that conversation, I know that I've always said in wet conditions and damp conditions, you've got to listen to the driver. When the track is dry, or as dry as it's going to get after that kind of rain, at what point do McLaren need to step in and say, look, Lando, we get what you're saying about the softs. I know you want to cover Lewis, but we're not confident they'll get to the end. The medium is the tyre to be on. Oscar has already said that. We know that. We've got a fresh set. Nobody else has. Let's go for it. I feel like the team need to step in at that point, because Norris was talking afterwards again, like I said earlier, about an inexperience in that area for him. How the car feels in those conditions and making the right call at the right time. McLaren have got that experience, and I feel like they could have come in and said medium tyres. And again, I know that's easy with the benefit of a couple of hours worth of hindsight, but that was ultimately what cost him today. And I think somebody made the point in chat earlier when I was talking about could Hamilton have caught Norris. I think Norris himself said that had he gone, that he felt that Lewis would have the pace to catch him if he was still behind him anyway. So I think he feels, a lot of people feel, the pundits feel, that was the moment that cost Lando Norris the race today, or a shot at the win.
Yeah, you can't help but agree, really. It could have been his. I'll tell you, the radio messages just before the pit stop between Lando and McLaren. Lando said, "We need to box. Soft is better now. Any slick tyre." And McLaren said, "We can choose medium to counter people like Verstappen, or choose a soft to counter Hamilton." Lando said, "I think Hamilton, or do you think medium? I don't mind." And McLaren said, "We are going softs." So sort of a bit of wishy-washiness from Lando there, and then the ultimate decision from McLaren. And I think the ultimate thing is here. McLaren are in this fight now. They're at the top of the they're at the top of the race. They're fighting Red Bull, arguably the fastest car. They've arrived now. They are here. They're fighting for wins, and they needed to be ready for that. And I think we've seen in a few races now, they haven't quite got themselves together as a team in the way that Red Bull have. They're a little green on strategy, decision making. I feel, they should be ready to know what tires they're going on. It seemed really obvious, and I'm aware I'm doing armchair strategy here. Like, I'm just talking as a sort of fan here, but it seemed really obvious that the medium was the stronger tire to be on. They had an advantage as a team in having medium tires when the cars around them didn't. And the way it played out with the soft tires, and the way Piastri was on the medium seemed to be the case. And I feel like McLaren, with all the information at hand, probably should have known that, and probably should have just made the call and said mediums are going to be strongest. They'll take you to the end and give you the best overall pace. The wrong call was made, and I think Lando also didn't seem particularly strong on where he stood on the tires, which since Sochi 2020, is it 2020, 2021? 2021, I think, when he lost what was potentially his first race win by kind of dilly-dallying over tyres and making the wrong call, and McLaren not making the call for him. I feel like there are still lessons to be learned that are not left on the table there. So, yeah, some bad calls. Bad call with Piastri, leaving him out. He could have been up there for the win, potentially, as well. I know he would have been stacked like Russell was, and kind of probably come out behind Verstappen in those first stops. But again, it would have been a lot less time than he would have lost by doing that extra lap in the wet. So a lot of seemingly silly errors that shouldn't be making their way through now that they're at the front. And if they want to be winning races regularly, if they want to be beating Verstappen, who is still pulling away from Lando in the championship somehow, they need to get this together, because Red Bull and Verstappen anyway, not with Perez. God knows what they were doing with Perez, but Red Bull with Verstappen were making all the right calls at all the right moments. And despite seemingly being a bit on the back foot in terms of pace, got within a second and a half of a win nonetheless. And McLaren kind of seemed to have it all under control halfway through this race and ended up third and fourth.
Yeah, I agree with pretty much everything there. It's a strange call. And what I found quite interesting as well was when, as I kind of touched on a moment ago, when Piastri was asked about tyres, he was very decisive. And that's where this whole mature head on young shoulders comes from. He was very, yes, the medium is the tyre to be on. That's maybe something Lando needs to, again, I love that you brought it up, armchair strategy, so much easier after the fact, isn't it? But maybe that's something Lando needs to look at and work on with the team. Maybe he needs to have a word behind the scenes and say, look, somebody needs to make these calls. If I'm not sure, if I'm umming and ahhing, you need to say to me, these are the lap times that are happening on this tyre. This is what we think about what we've got. We think we should go with that. And then if he still turns around and goes with the soft, then that's on him, which is he's kind of sort of got it anyway today. But I feel like there was a conversation that could have been had there that wasn't quite so flappy. I'm going to go with it. Felt it when you heard it back. They weren't really sure what to do when you've got Oscar Piastri on the other side of the garage going mediums. It's difficult. I guess it depends on your driver as well. They might feel different on the tyres, but Purple Zebra said he lost 20 seconds in a lap, so yeah, should have stacked. We'll get to Piastri in just a second. Kevin says, that's our job, sit in an armchair with a beer and yell at the TV. Absolutely. I agree. This was not the condition for soft tyres unless for the final 10 laps, says NJ0. And Charles says, best race of the season so far, and it had no yellow or red flags or safety cars or even investigations for anything from lights out to the end. Yeah, it was a very clean race. I think there was a brief yellow at one point, but that was about it really overall. So yeah,
very good point.
It doesn't always need a safety car, does it? I'm gonna say it, Bernie was on something with the sprinklers though. He absolutely was. Yeah, so Piastri, by the way, I will say I was gonna ask you that actually before we move on to Piastri. Do you think Norris is too hard on himself after races, or are you I know this is quite a divisive one in some ways, because some people think that's a good thing because it shows that he's so determined to win and he's so driven to want to win, and nothing other than a win is good enough. But he said his kind of review of the race was, we should have won, we didn't. Do you think he's too hard on himself sometimes? Because sometimes I listen to him and I think, you know, in these conditions, more experienced drivers have kind of got the jump on you. In looking at Lewis Hamilton, for example, this happens from time to time. I don't think he needs to beat himself up quite so hard, but then he's always been quite, thinking back to his junior days, he was always quite hard on himself as well. So I just think, I don't know what I'm trying to get at. It just felt like he's been a little bit too hard on himself for what was, yes, his decision, as he said, to pit a lap later, but it's still third place. They've come a long way in a year, but at the same time, it is nice to see that he only wants to win. I think that's a trait that I think all drivers should have, quite frankly. Second, what did Senna used to say? Second was first of the losers, something like that.
Old Ron Dennis. That's a
yeah, was it Ron Dennis?
An old Ron Dennis quote. He was clearly very, very miserable, wasn't he? You know, despite what was essentially a very strong season for him. But he knows now. He knows that he should be winning races. I think there's been a few times this season where he could have won. He's won one race, but he could have won more. He's here at home. He can see all the orange and luminous caps in the crowd that are for him. You know, he wants to win in front of this crowd. He was out in front by making overtakes. You know, he was in a really good position, and it kind of all got away from him again. So, yeah, he knows. He said he should have done better. They should have made better decisions, and they've lost more points to Max again. So, and it's not the first time he's been pretty miserable after getting what was essentially quite a good result, you know, in the grand scheme of things. Is he too hard on himself? I think he's always been someone who seems to be very kind of in tune with his emotions. Like he's very happy to kind of say how he's feeling, to show it on his face. And I think so far, and I hope this continues to be the case, but he's come back the next weekend, bounced back, still as strong as ever. Like he's been dejected a few times this weekend, and he's come back and he's still delivering on Saturday, on Sunday. He's still there. So it seems like he is processing it probably in a healthy way, able to kind of move on, work out what went wrong, and just move on from it. So maybe so far, I think it's kind of okay that he's being down on himself, because he's able to. He's not got himself into a slump, has he? Sometimes you see with drivers, they everything's going wrong for them and they can't bring themselves out of it, and that translates into bad results, which then translates into them feeling even worse, and so on. That can happen. But for Norris, we're not seeing that really so much at the moment. So as long as he's working through the kind of Sunday evening disappointment and turning it into Friday, Saturday, Sunday results the next weekend, I think it's okay. But yeah, something to keep an eye on, I think.
Yeah. Okay, fair enough. I was just intrigued because I thought I was watching the post-race interviews and I thought, I thought it was just a bit harsh. But then I also like that he's, takes responsibility for the things that are his responsibility. And I guess I'd much rather see a driver, if he'd have come out and said, we could have won today, we didn't, but woo, P3, it doesn't sit right at the same time, does it, when you're throwing a race win away? And so, yeah, well, I'll leave it at that. But just a very quick, moment before we got onto Piastri. Quick Scott D, thank you very much for your super chat and for your words. Says F1 word at Chamber. This is the greatest chat in all of YouTube race reaction. There you go. Just an excellent bunch of racing minds that can put their fanboyness aside. Love these Sunday chats. Repeat response to that by saying, and I love that this is the way the channel has always been, just a bunch of cool people enjoying racing together. And Marie Hove also said it's a wonderful community. So thank you very much for your kind words and for your support and super chat. But also just to point out, you guys in chat, you guys watching, you're all part of this as well. So you are a great community, and I have loved the last 7 years, and I hope that we have many more years together. Wasn't that nice? But thank you very much. I appreciate that. So drop a like. We've got 730 of you here, 186 likes. Drop a like for the race and for those nice words as well. And don't forget to subscribe as well if you are new. Lots to come this season and what could be quite an epic season. But Oscar Piastri, we'll wrap up McLaren and Piastri now before we get on to the rest. Got passed by Verstappen at same corner a couple of laps later is what I've written here, but I assume that was the... I don't know if that makes any sense. If I think that was on the Norris thing, but anyway, yeah, we'll just leave that. I think really the only thing I want to talk about was Piastri. Just try to look at something that's worth pointing out. Not the language of use there isn't quite quite right to point out. Yeah, I think the thing that did for Piastri today, because he was coming back at Norris, wasn't he? Sort of in those stages before the pit stop, and I thought he's in with a shot here of a victory, and then all of a sudden. They explained it as they didn't pit him because they didn't want to do the double stack and lose time. But as Purple Zebra pointed out, he lost about 20 seconds. Or I think Purple Zebra said 20 seconds. I think it was actually about 11 by staying out. So for the sake of saving themselves not losing 2 seconds, they lost 11 at least. And that seemed bonkers to leave him out at that point. It didn't make any sense at all. And then when he pitted, it was a slow stop as well, which was awfully convenient, I must say. It was a slow stop as well for him, 3.5 seconds. So that really did for him today, because he had the pace to be in the mix for a win, and certainly had the pace to be on the podium today. And I'm really disappointed. Obviously, I'm a bit of an Aussie P fan, so I'm a little bit disappointed that he's not up there. But it's another example of McLaren strategy just not really going Piastri's way. I mean, I'm sure there have been times over the last sort of season and a half where things have gone his way, but it felt today like it was never going to go his way, and it was just a frustrating one. But that really was the moment that did for him, and he was P4 at the end. What I will say is he was 15 seconds behind after the pit stop, which was on lap 38, and by the end of the race he was just 4.8 behind Norris come the end. So that also hammers home the point that the medium tyre was the right tyre to be on, something, as I've said twice, Piastri had already told the team. Old head, young shoulders.
Yeah, and I'm glad to see that kind of decisive call from Piastri, and the right one as well. I mean, if it had been a very decisive call and it had been the wrong one, then maybe I would have said maybe he needs to lead on the team a bit more. But no, the race. And actually, we talked a little bit about Mercedes drivers working together rather than get too involved in each other and let Verstappen kind of take them. I think, especially at the beginning when they were together, I think they were being very well behaved. I feel like Piastri had the pace over Norris for quite a while before it got a little bit drizzly, but didn't get overly aggressive with him, because he's not afraid to make a move on Norris at all. But I feel seemed quite restrained at the beginning, especially when we knew rain was coming and being ahead would give you priority in the pits, which came to bite him in the end. So interesting to see him actually be quite restrained in that early phase where we were speaking about them kind of waiting for the rain to come and not overcooking the tires or causing themselves any issues. Otherwise, I think, like from his perspective in terms of driving, he did a good race. He had great pace. He was keeping up with drivers around him. It was just that pit stop that really just threw him completely out of contention for anything better. I think if he didn't have a normal pit stop and everything else had gone the same, he would have he might have challenged for second, maybe, because he would have been on those medium tires, but he would have been a lot closer to Norris, and maybe Norris would have made better calls. We do a lot of this like what ifs and how that would have like sliding doors its way out in a ripple across the rest of the race. But I think another good race for Piastri. He's definitely up there and doing exactly what McLaren need from him, and not doing what we were afraid of last we were talked a bit about last race in kind of getting too involved in tripping up the other car. I think they kind of worked well together this time because they knew it was a little bit precarious and there was a lot on the table.
Piastri was a second quicker than Norris on the final lap as well, so the pace was there. I'm just wondering, sort of as you get, I guess. No, actually, no, forget that. I was just going to say, I'm just trying to work out because he was 11 seconds clear of Norris before he pitted, because Norris had gone early and got that down to a couple of seconds. So if you say that he pits with Norris, same lap, there's a lot of ifs and buts here. I'm aware of that. But if he pits with Norris on the same lap and loses a couple of seconds to double stack, he's probably, given the pace he had in the mediums towards the end, he probably has got a shot of second place. Certainly third.
Yeah, definitely.
But I'll say second place. I mean, maybe not, no, because Verstappen was 9/10 quicker than him on the final lap, so maybe not second, but certainly third place. So yeah, just a bit disappointed for Oscar Piastri. I hope that the strategy goes his way next time around, because he's impressing me again this season. He impressed me last season, and I'm very excited for him as a driver. But I think overall, through no fault of his own, he's ended up fourth. I think he was making a call on tyres when he needed to. I think the team made the decision. I think I saw somebody, I think Vesk said in chat that Zach Brown has said that they weren't expecting it to rain as bad as it did, so they didn't expect him to lose as much time staying out for a lap, which is fair enough. These, you never know with the rain in this bloody country, do you? So I'll let him off on that one. But I think it feels a little bit like one that got away for Oscar Piastri as well today. But obviously ifs, buts, and all of that business. But thank you to David for your super chat. Says thanks for all your streams and videos, Sean. Another amazing result for Hulkenberg. We're getting to him, I promise. Thank you very much, David. Round of applause, please, for Patty O Furniture. Very good name. Says incredible race, so happy for Hamilton. I love that Sean and Stuart has become a regular race reaction combo. Thank you so much. First super chat as well, so thank you very much, Patty, for your support. Thank you to Andras as well for your super chat. That's really appreciated, your support on the channel. Just make sure that wasn't no, there's no comment with that one, but thank you very much. So love for Andras in chat. Andreas, sorry, in chat. I gave it a love heart, so thank you very much. Appreciate the support. That took an hour to get through the top three teams. Thanks, Checo. Let's roll on, though, to Ferrari.
Those were definitely the teams we mostly focused on.
Yeah,
race
I think
correction,
that's fair. I think the fact that took so long, I think, like I say, I said at the start, didn't I? A lot of focus on those, so there's not much going on behind. But there was, but not that we saw. But yeah, Ferrari. Oh boy. Carlos Sainz, pretty good race actually. There was a point, as you touched on earlier, Stuart, where I thought he might be starting to snap at the heels of Verstappen and was in the mix a little bit, so I thought he might be able to get a better result than that. That was lap 26, he was closing on Verstappen at turn 6, but he did hit the brake and slid wide, which cost him a little bit of time, but no damage done, and pitted at the end of lap 26 for Inters, and then sort of took fairly comfortably P5 in the end. He was 8 seconds clear of Hulkenberg, but he did make a stop at the end for fastest lap, which he got. So you can stick another 20 seconds on that. So 20 seconds clear of Hulkenberg, what would have been about 14 seconds behind Piastri. So a relatively lonely race in that respect for Sainz. But I think given the conditions, given what Ferrari tend to do when it rains, as we saw with Leclerc, we'll get to that in a second. Actually, that's a really good result for Carlos Sainz. It's 10 points as well on the board, isn't it? So good race. Good drive. Shame he couldn't be a bit more competitive with those ahead. But probably, actually, to be fair, Stuart, what's that? Fourth best finishing team? Mercedes, Red Bull, McLaren, probably about where Ferrari are now, to be fair.
Which is so weird, isn't it? Ferrari are now the fourth best team.
Talk about a title challenge after Monaco, Stuart.
I know, that was like 2 races ago. What's happening? So here's the thing. Sainz took that extra pit stop at the end to get the fastest lap because he was in that no man's land. He wasn't keeping up with McLaren. He had oodles of time in hand to the next car down, which was the Haas, incredibly. He just kind of tootled around after that kind of initial challenge and the changeable conditions to Verstappen. Yeah, he was just kind of that's where he was. He wasn't. He was sort of in the middle of nobody. and just did the best race he could, and I suppose luckily he had a gap enough to get that little fastest lap at the end, but otherwise probably didn't have much to say about that race, did he? Otherwise, really, solid strategy, solid pace. They extracted the most out of that Ferrari. It seems that like this was the obvious strategy to do with your Ferrari car. It's weird they didn't do it with both of them.
Well, quite. Oh, one of these streams, Stuart, I'm just going to have a breakdown. You know it's going to come. Stuart's in charge. I need to go cry. Yeah, I've got not much more on Carlos Sainz, but I think a good result overall. And like I say, about where Ferrari are at the minute. Leclerc, great start, by the way. Started 11th, up to P8 by the end of lap 1. It was all looking so good. Got past Lance Stroll on lap 13 for P7. That was down at Stowe. And then on lap 19, when... I assume there must have been a conversation. Leclerc just seems to enjoy running wet tyres on a dry track and dry tyres on a wet track. It must be a thing that he's decided to do this season. Lap 19 took a gamble from 7th place. I kind of get Perez's gamble, by the way, from down in 16th or whatever, but 7th place, points potentially on the board and in the race and in the mix, pits for Inters when it wasn't ready for Inters. And at one stage, I checked the timings. Lap 25, he was lapped, and he was, at times, 15 seconds a lap slower than the leaders. His race was effed, as I've written here, and then I've written in a massive strop, not even going to watch him now. I'm so fed up with it. But no, it was 15 seconds slower, and Ferrari still left him out, hoping the rain might come. I'm going to quote... the great Martin Brundle here. You've got to be on the right tyre at the right time. Ferrari were not on the right tyre at the right time. And then when they realised it, they still went, yeah, this is the way to go. Absolutely bonkers. But why Leclerc? I don't get the stop in the first place, Stuart. Surely P7, you could maybe pit a lap earlier than others might, but wait for the track to be wet enough for them, for goodness sake. I mean, when did he pitted lap 19 for Inters? The first stop from, let's say, race winner Lewis Hamilton... was lap 27 for Inters. I mean, that's bonkers. What are they doing? Have they brought the old strategist back or something?
It really was a wild play from 7th place. They got themselves into a nice position there after a bit of a daft qualifying. There wasn't the need to take the risks. I guess there's a chance they would have looked like absolute heroes if it had been Inter's weather, but they only would have jumped the other teams by a lap, because as soon as they saw Leclerc on blistering Inter's pace, everyone else would have come in, right? It's not... They wouldn't have gained as much pace over the other teams as they would have lost by being on the wrong tyre, which is exactly where they were. And they stayed on those Inters for 8 laps in essentially the dry, wrecked them. So we had to change to another set of Inters when it actually rained. Just an absurd... call from them, ended up in 14th place. I just don't understand what they were doing. I don't have a lot of words for no. what they were up to. Leclerc must be absolutely livid that he was made to run around for so long on the wrong tyres. I don't know why he didn't just come in himself. I guess the calculation was, we're losing seconds every lap, but we're going to lose, 21, 22 seconds to make an extra pit stop. But as you said, if it was 15 seconds a lap at one point slower than other people, then you kind of...
That's a pit stop in a lap and a half.
You make that up easily. So just get yourself back on some mediums or something and get on with it. Just madness. I don't really... just utter madness. And just having Sainz there showing just like a normal strategy at play, what they could have achieved is even more gutting, honestly. They Ferrari'd it. Ferrari are back. I thought for a while they had gone away, but they are back. I'm sorry, Sean.
yeah, me too. There are a couple of people who point out that Ferrari did say it was going to rain heavier the next lap or a couple of laps later, but it didn't, did it? And that's the reality. And like you say, Charles Leclerc, I mean, we didn't get much of his team radio. Like we say, a lot of our folks at the front understand it because of what was going on, but I'd love to hear his team radio when it's all released across this week. And I think race fans tend to do a transcript of it all, don't they? So I have a look at that. But I imagine he's, what the hell are you doing? I want to pit. Probably a different accent, of course. But yeah, I don't know. I don't know what to say. It just screwed his race. I guess, in fairness, I'm trying. He did finished 14th. Despite that chaos, so he did finish ahead of Valtteri Bottas, who pitted one fewer time than he did, or one less time than he did, and then Ocon, Perez, and Zhou pitted an extra time. So I mean, that's something, I guess. He was only one lap down come the end, but I'm clutching. But he was 30 seconds behind Daniel Ricciardo over the line. Ricciardo did make a stop lesser, so that's fair enough. But yeah, just not good enough for Ferrari. Like a couple of people in chat just said, just copy, and you said it, copy Carlos's strategy. Stick with Carlos. There was no reason in P. If Leclerc had been P sort of down there with Perez after the start, and Ferrari were thinking, let's just put him on these inters and see if we can get the crossover point as to when to bring Carlos in from P6 or P5 or whatever, then I kind of get it, but not from P7. That was unnecessary. It's frustrating. I've just seen somebody in chat say, apparently that's no points for Leclerc across the triple header. I'm just going to go check that. But it is another race. When did we say this? We said this a few weeks ago, possibly last week even. I don't know. But Lewis Hamilton there, running around, celebrating his win, and rightly so. Leclerc. Yeah, no. Leclerc scored fifth place in Spain. That's not the triple header though, is it? So it was. Yeah. So he did get fifth place in Spain, but it was 11th in Austria and 14th in Germany at Silverstone. So yeah, no, that's not quite right. But yeah, still not good. But you got Lewis Hamilton there celebrating his podium. I'll repeat the joke, if you like, that I made a few weeks ago, and he's sort of going, oh yes, gotta win, this is great stuff, team, let's keep this up, all emotional, and goes, how did Ferrari do? The fuck? And he suddenly goes home and he's got the contract right. Where did I start? So is that an escape clause? It's madness. I wonder what he's thinking, but of course his concern will be next year, won't it? Not this year. But if you're a Lewis Hamilton fan and you've enjoyed today, I hate to be that guy as a Ferrari fan to warn you, next year you are going to have so much fun. You're going to have so much fun. Good luck. You can cry with me.
I can ask a little question. I don't know how you... it was just something my friend said to me during the race. Do you think Leclerc is a little too complacent and leans on calls from the pit wall too much, rather than being a bit more decisive himself and making some of his own strategy calls and driving decisions in the way that, I don't know, Max Verstappen did, overruling and saying, this is silly, we shouldn't do this, I'm staying out, or whatever. Just, I don't know. Because he does just seem to go along with what Ferrari tell him to do and then end up in trouble like today sometimes. Not every time, but sometimes I think that can let him down.
I don't know if it's a question, but it's a point to make. This is genuinely their name. No Google, not going to give you my name, go fish. Says, do you reckon Lewis will accept those strategies when at Ferrari next year? Kind of taking your point. Would someone like a Lewis Hamilton or a Max Verstappen in that car say, no, what are you doing? In fact, Lewis did, didn't he? Do you want inters? And he said no.
Yeah.
He said no. Leclerc needs to be firmer. He needs to be a part of that. And I'd like to see Carlos Sainz ready, see if there's a conversation there, but it's maybe something he needs to work on. But I can't talk about Ferrari anymore. I'm sorry. It's too depressing. I'm going to become a Sauber fan because it could be a lot more fun. Or maybe not, but yeah. Should we get to a positive? Should we do positives? Why not?
Let's go.
Nico Hulkenberg, what a bloody weekend. What a bloody couple of weekends from Nico Hulkenberg. 6th place on the grid today. I didn't think he had a cat in hell's chance of keeping P6, and he's finished in P6. Did have a poor first lap and dropped to P9. Went off at turn 3 on lap 1, came back on the track, forced Alonso to kind of almost avoid him, and then the Aston got hit by Albon, or hit Albon as a result. Stuart's it was noted but didn't really do anything about it, which was fair enough. Slow stop for Inters on lap 26, 4.2 seconds. But all in all, not a lot of notes. We didn't see much of him, but what a fantastic drive. And that is big points for Haas. I think there are a couple of points now, or 4 points behind RB in the Constructors' Championship. They've pulled well clear of Alpine. They're having a fantastic season when you consider where they've been sort of over the last few years and the tire issues they had last year. The way they're performing in no small part is because of the upgrades, but also massively because Nico Hulkenberg is extracting absolutely everything out of that car and deserves so much credit. That's 2 consecutive 6th place finishes for Nico Hulkenberg in a Haas. That's impressive. So, I mean, well done to him, well done to Haas. But, we're talking driver of the weekend. We'll do that maybe later, but he's got to be in the mix there. I mean, what a performance.
Yeah, and as you say, went under the radar a little bit, but I think people were noticing. They were just like, they're looking down the order on the timing tower, and Hulkenberg's still there, 6th or 7th, or, wherever he was at a particular point in the race. Really showing himself at the moment. People are talking about Nico Hulkenberg, and he's got himself that nice seat next year. Really quite exciting to watch. He's again, today was a little bit in a bit of a no man's land in terms of performance between the cars around him, but he did make that pass on Stroll on track.
Yeah.
Also gained a position, and the other two positions he gained from Russell retiring and Leclerc doing an insane pit stop for Inters. But he did do a pass on the track, and otherwise put in some great pace and just kept it clean in sixth. Didn't make any mistakes. Didn't make any strategy errors. I suppose that lap one, not really necessarily. It was just sort of a bit of lap one shenanigans rather than a terrible error. So, yeah, really impressive drive for them. And for a while, he was the lead Ferrari, wasn't he?
Yeah, for too long. I don't.
Yes. And a great Saturday again. He's been having some really, really good Saturdays. He's really. I feel like Nico Hulkenberg's been around forever. In a way, he still seems like young, but around forever. And it would be really nice if Audi came in swinging and gave him something to fight with, and that would be a really fun story for him. I don't know if that'll be the case, but I think, just generally very impressed with Hulkenberg, and I hope he gets some results to speak of in the years to come.
Kaori was saying that he ran in sixth pretty much the whole race. Once Sainz has sort of got through there, so it's a fantastic drive. 8.4 seconds from P5 is solid when that P5 is a Ferrari, and Stroll was catching at the end, to be fair, so that could have been a fun fight if there was another lap. There was 8 tenths between them. Stroll was 8 tenths quicker on the final lap, so that could have been fun. But yeah, he did well to take sixth place, and he absolutely deserves all the credit he's getting. Just about apologies, by the way, to anyone who's to the 600 of you that are here. If there was a lot of noise in the background on my mic, I have my fan on, I forgot, and it's a loud fan, and I forgot to turn it off because it's quite warm. So apologies if you heard all that during the stream, but I've just switched it off, so hopefully that's a bit better. But it's warm in here when the PC starts chucking hot air at me. So yeah, great stuff from Nico Hulkenberg. K-Mag, I've not got much on K-Mag. I think we're about to hit a theme here, Stuart. Nice move on the inside of Ocon at turn 3 and finished at turn 4 early on. Wide at turn 15, did slide on the exit curb at Stowe, caught the side very nicely, nice save, because that would have been a big crash. It was one of the first actually to move to the softs on lap 38. Yes, I mean it's not as impressive as Hulkenberg's drive, but he's 12th place, clear of Ricciardo, Leclerc, Bottas, Ocon, Perez, and Zhou. Can you see him struggling? And I think drove okay. I was really a couple of people in the chat made the point yesterday in the qualifying watch on that gap to Hulkenberg in qualifying is, obvious statement alert, way too big. He can't be doing that every weekend. And I feel like at the moment, I don't think this is controversial in the slightest. Hulkenberg is by far the stronger driver, which surprised me a bit, because I think Magnussen is quick, and I think that on his day he can be bloody brilliant, but that day is just not coming around very often at the moment, and Hulkenberg is really delivering in that car. So I think it makes a case for keeping Magnussen next year a little bit tougher. It doesn't look like he's staying anyway. We'll not get into that now. But yeah, I think overall, okay race, 12th place, not last. I guess is a positive. Not far off Logan Sargeant, 1.1 seconds off. Yes, I said Logan Sargeant. We'll get to him in a second in P11. But yeah, 12th place for Magnussen. No points, but when was the last time he scored? Anybody in chat can get there before I can open up Wikipedia?
I got it. It was last race.
Of course it was. Come on, Sean. Okay, apart from that, just looking at. Look at the results. Hulkenberg this season, 16th in the first race, then 10th, 9th, 11th, 10th, 11th, 11th, retired 11th, 11th, 6th, 6th. Then you've got Magnussen 12th, 12th, 10th, 13, 16, 19, 12, retired 12, 17, 8, and 12. He's just not been a great season for K-Mag. I feel stupid now because it wasn't. I literally said it was 6th and 8th last race, so there you go. Yeah, anything on K-Mag is what I guess I'm going to come to you with, Stuart, before I try and waffle this out for any longer.
Yeah, I think a race mostly stymied once again by a sort of poor qualifying performance and couldn't really put anything together from there. Got up to 12th, which I guess is fair enough, but kind of, I don't think Haas are going to be like tragically disappointed or anything, because I think as a team they're sort of working well together. But you can imagine if they were slightly tighter as I open up the constructors again. I guess they're only 4 points behind RB, and if Magnussen had been able to just put in a couple of extra points here and there, they may have been in 6th right now. But I think that's what they're going to be looking for going forward. I think they're going to need to be just getting more points than RB, and I feel like they're going to need both drivers to sort of be around that kind of 9th and 10th phase a bit more often, which maybe they'll be able to do. But yeah, it's clear that the Haas is better than they thought it was going to be at the start of the year, and they're making some real strides. And Magnussen needs to keep up. He's another driver that's sort of making their team a bit one-sided in the way that maybe Red Bull, Williams are similar.
I think that could be a fun fight, Haas versus RB for that P6. That could be a lot. In fact, they might even drag Aston Martin into that fight if those, particularly Haas, start keep performing. On the subject of Aston Martin, look at that segue, perfect. P7 for Lance Stroll, like I say, not far off P6 in the end. P8 for Fernando Alonso. My notes are, I'll say, limited. Stroll started P8, slow stop for slicks on lap 40, finished P7. Alonso, that lap 1 incident with Hulkenberg, he was trying to avoid Hulkenberg. Again, I agree with Stuart, not much in that at all, just a first lap, first couple of corners. First proper braking zone actually turn 3, isn't it? It's a really first corner incident, you could argue. And was hit by Albon. No damage done as far as we can see. However, thankfully, that were a bit too northern, didn't last at all. Thankfully, they've sent the press release out. So, Lance Stroll, it was a tricky race out there today, but we managed it well and picked up a decent load of points for the team. Had a good start and got Hulkenberg off the line. Then the rain started a few laps in and we stopped for the intermediate tyres. It's always a challenge to judge how long you can survive on the dry compound. You don't want to leave it too late and end up in the barriers, but I think we made the right call well. And Alonso said it was a good result for us today with both cars scoring points in the top 10. I feel like, I'm not attacking Alonso here, but I feel like that in the top 10 was added there because they needed to fit so many words in. It was a good result for us today with both cars scoring points in the top 10. That is the only way you can score points. I felt more competitive this weekend and it seemed we're in our natural position, which is more encouraging than the last few races. It was a tricky race to understand with question marks on whether to fit wet or dry tyres at certain points of the race. I think we waited one lap too late to switch to intermediates, but we need a bit of luck with these decisions. It's up to us to keep improving and find more performance in the car heading into the upcoming races. So that's a wrap up there of Aston Martin's race. Interesting, actually, Lance Stroll this weekend out qualifying Alonso and beating him in the race. I asked it in the... I'll let you do your notes as well, of course, Stuart, on Aston, but just after you've done that part, just a quick question, because I put it to chat yesterday. How much of these last few weeks has been Stroll stepping up and Alonso struggling with the car? Because there has been a real switch there. Stroll has had a really good run of races. And results and good qualifying as well this season. He's out-qualified Alonso a few times, more than a few times this year. So it just feels like Alonso in particular has really, really struggled. I'm trying to think, really, it feels like for quite a while, but it's we've had like a million races in the last 3 weeks. So I'm sort of trying to work out. It feels like he's struggled for a while now, Fernando. And I'm wondering how much he's trying to work this car out and what he's doing to try and help them. I say struggled, 6th and 8th in the last 4 races and then a 12th and an 18th in between, so not terrible. But what are your thoughts on Aston's incredibly entertaining race that we've got loads of notes on?
Oh, my notes are so extensive. I'm gonna just give you I'm gonna give you it in one bullet point.
18 pages front and back.
Yes. Look, I mean, I think they're going to be pretty pleased with this. It was pretty quiet and anonymous for them, other than the kind of first lap shenanigans and Stroll having a little battle with Hulkenberg and then catching him at the end. Other than that, I think they played a fairly safe strategy, made it work, came home 7th and 8th. I think it's a kind of job done for Aston Martin, bearing in mind where they are right now and where they kind of expect to be. Probably not where they hope to be, but other than that, yeah, quite a sort of quiet day doing what they probably could with that car. As for Stroll versus Alonso, it is interesting, isn't it? Alonso got 6 points finishes in a row at the start of this year, including a fastest lap in China, and has then sort of, had a 19th and 11th, a 12th and 18th among the 6th and 8th he also had in the second 6 races of the season. He has made himself a lot more anonymous in, I guess, the second quarter of this season, because he's definitely not as happy. He's not as bullish. When that car was really working and he was like, haha, I've made the perfect choice to move to Aston Martin and I'm getting results and I'm getting podiums. He was very much always in front of the camera, giving a lot of sound bites, very, very happy. And now he's faded away kind of into the background a bit. it's really hard to say if it's him that's struggling or if it's just sort of the team kind of losing footing a little bit and he's just kind of getting on with it. But definitely interesting to see Stroll kind of managing better, which is not really what you expect, especially when the car's struggling. And part of me wonders, is this the point where Alonso's age is starting to come into it a little bit? Because he's been doing really strong for someone in his 40s. It doesn't seem like his age was anything here, but at some point age is going to kick in, and I don't know if we're getting to that point where it's just starting to have a little bit of effect on his peak performance. I don't know. I don't want to say anything too out of pocket, but that there's always going to be that kind of question mark now that he's 42, 43, whatever he is right now.
Yeah, we'll see what happens in the coming races. He might pick it up again, but a couple of people pointing in chat, they might be focused already now on 26. They're making some great appointments as well, though, aren't they? With Andy Cowell coming in from Mercedes and the rumours around Adrian Newey. If that happens, then actually maybe the team are focused on a bit more the longer term. They can't do anything about the car until next year, so they won't be focusing on that. But maybe they're just trying to get everything in the right place, and that that disrupts the team, doesn't it? And maybe they're not going to focus too much on this year's car. I don't know, but bearing in mind this year's car's got to do next year as well, probably. So we'll see what happens in races. I'm not going to sit here and pretend that, and I know you're not either, Stuart, that Fernando Alonso suddenly lost all of his ability. But it's quite odd that the last few races seems to have fallen back a little bit, but there might be reasons behind that. I'm sure we'll get to know soon. The last team for this part, and then we'll do the rest very quickly afterwards, because I've got many notes on the other ones. But Williams, Alex Albon, P9 today. Contact with Alonso at the start. We've been over that a couple of times now. Nothing in that. Tapped Alonso at the back. Thought he had a puncture. Team said all was okay. Did have a 9.7 second stop at one point for Inters on lap 27, so that will have cost him 9.7 seconds. Could have cost him a shot at P8. He was 4.8 behind Alonso, so in fact, actually... 4.8 behind Alonso, so it could have been P8 today, Albon. His pace was good as well. The final lap, he did a 1:29.718 compared to Alonso's 1:31.430. So Albon, that pit stop could, of course, it don't know how these things shake out, but it could have cost him P8 today. So, but great drive from Albon today. A couple of points for Williams. Feels like a while since I've said a couple of points for Williams. You could hear him just checking, can't you, to make sure I don't make a fool of myself. Yeah, they've not scored since Monaco, so yeah, it has been a while. So good stuff from him. I thought they'd be competitive this weekend, Williams, and it seems to have suited them. The conditions helping as well. And I know it's not points, all right, but I think Logan Sargeant needs a bit of positivity behind him for this weekend. He qualified well in 12th place. Obviously got through into Q2. Drove well today to end up P11. There was a point towards the end where I was getting a little bit excited because he was quicker than Tsunoda in 10th. And I thought, he wouldn't dare, would he? He wouldn't dare get himself a point this weekend. But he wasn't a million miles away in the end. 9.6 seconds, but for Logan Sargeant, that's practically a win, isn't it? Bless him. But no, really good drive from Logan Sargeant. Actually, I feel like there have been a few weekends just lately where either in qualifying or in a race, we've been able to say, actually, that was pretty decent from Logan Sargeant. So maybe finding a bit of form at the right time. I'm not sure it's going to save him for next season, maybe not even mid-season, but I was impressed with him this weekend. I think he deserves a bit of credit. The only thing I've got in my notes is Alex had a big piece of bodywork come off at lap 3, is what he said in the radio. So I'm hoping Stuart's got something. I'll go see if they got the press release while you're running through your extensive notes.
I was just thinking, actually, I was looking more into... Once you said he was only 4.8 behind Alonso at the end, absolutely flying in those final laps from Albon that I hadn't fully clocked until this moment. And considering he was on exactly the same tyres as Alonso, 14 lap old mediums, is quite the feat, really, to be honest. And I know Alonso probably wasn't pushing as hard as he might have been if he'd known his position was in jeopardy or anything. That is still phenomenal work from Albon right at the end there. So good work from him. And I'm with you on Sargeant. To be honest, for him, a good weekend. I think we're at that point now where I'm not sure anything's going to save that seat for him, but a solid run from him. But I feel like Williams, with their ambitions, are going to want to try someone else in that seat for next year. But I think we were talking about Norris doing himself down, maybe. And I feel like Sargeant is coping okay with the fact that he's sort of being thrashed by Albon, and there's a lot on his. The spotlight on him is, when are you going to be replaced? Essentially, that seems to be the story around Sargeant for the season. So to be able to knuckle down, get on with it, put in an 11th, had a fairly decent qualifying for him as well. Is I think a win for him as far as his season is concerned.
I'd say it is a win for him, which I don't know if you've noticed. He has now moved up into 20th place in the Drivers' Championship ahead of Valtteri Bottas on countback with that 11th place finish. Oof. So, yes, Logan Sargeant is now 20th in a 20-driver championship, and Bottas goes 21. So, yeah, not great for Bottas there, but good news for Logan Sargeant. I agree with you, though. I don't think anything's going to save his seat, short of a sudden surprising title challenge or something, but that's not going to happen, is it? Alex Albon says, made contacts in turn 3, we've been over that. Lost a chunk of his front wing, so I was a bit worried at the beginning. Everything mostly fell into place after that, was happy. Knew the rain would come and there would be a second chance, so I just had to stay patient and wait for the opportunities to arise. Made the right calls for the most part, boxing at the right time and for the right tyres. Did lose some time on the pit stops, we've touched on that one as well. Without damage, I could have scored more points, but I'm still happy it's a weekend where we really need to deliver a team. So that's good stuff. Always special to perform at your home Grand Prix, of course, or the team's home Grand Prix. Let's not get into that debate over Alex Albon. And Logan Sargeant, it was a good day in general from FP2, where we struggled in high fuel. We put the car in a much better place and it showed. Had good pace, particularly on the slick tyre. Struggled a little on the drying track with the Inters by degrading the tyres a little bit too much. Executed everything relatively well and kept it together in tricky conditions. Got quite unfortunate with the stacked stop for the Inters, with Alex having a slow stop ahead of me, which cost him time. So that's cost Sargeant time as well, that pit stop. Of course, in hindsight, there were maybe a couple of decisions that we could have done a lap or two earlier, which ultimately could have been a difference between a point or not. Overall, happy with the way I drove this weekend. I think he can be as well. So interesting to hear there, sort of reading through that Albon's slow stop cost him a shot at P8 and Sargeant was held up as well, which could have cost him a shot at P10. So bit of frustration there for Williams, but again, those things happen. As for the rest, let's do the rest then. So RB. Yuki Tsunoda started 13th, finished 10th place, a point there for him. I have nothing in my notes. And Daniel Ricciardo was one of the first, along with K-Mag, to move on to the softs on lap 38. He finished 13th place in the end, and they've sent their press release. It's just literally come through, so that's good news. So Tsunoda super quickly said, good but a tough race. Based on the pace we had in free practice, we knew it would be difficult to score points in dry conditions, so I think the wet conditions helped us keep the gap to the cars in front small. In previous races, I haven't appreciated the rain, but I think it helps us today. It's 1 point and we take it. There you go. Yuki Tsunoda doesn't appreciate the rain, but it worked for him today, so that's good. Looking ahead and moving forward, as usual, they always stick those at the end. And Danny Rick said it was a mixed conditions race, which was exciting. It certainly was. Ultimately grabbing some opportunities, but unfortunately we're not competitive. It was one of those days where we struggled more than we should have, so we'll try to get into figuring out why. Last 3 weekends, I think we have lost out a little bit. It's this old grade came in, which is funny, isn't it? They got the upgrade for Barcelona, it fell away. Again, looking forward, trying to understand things, etc. Nothing else really in there. But again, it's difficult when the focus is all at the front. So it's a point for Yuki. Yeah. And Ricciardo was 13th. There you go.
It's interesting that Ricciardo says the last 3 weekends we've lost we lost out a little bit, when the last 4 weekends are the only times he's scored points. But I get what he's saying. This, we've got Haas within reach of them in the in the title, and they're not. I think if you look at Yuki Tsunoda, you can definitely see that they've dropped off a little bit from where they were. They were doing regular Q3 and point scoring, and now they're not so much. So yeah, I think they've got a little bit less to fight with. And Ricciardo, especially, just having a sort of Ricciardo-y kind of time of it, which is kind of sad for this year. Generally, continue to be kind of impressed with Yuki Tsunoda. I don't know what his future holds, but I think he's just wringing whatever's possible out of that car, to be honest, and he's done it again this weekend.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I like to, obviously, I feel like I say every week now, but like to see more from for Daniel Ricciardo, really. If he is seriously linked with that Red Bull seat, then I think he needs to be doing more. But we'll see what happens, I guess. I always feel bad when we get to this point, but I can't do anything if we didn't see them. Zhou for Sauber, he was in Bottas, sorry, first. 15th place for him. P15. Zhou was 18th. Bottas, P14 and well behind Ricciardo, 21 seconds on lap 36. Ended the race just 1.3 seconds behind Leclerc, but quite a way off Ricciardo, to be fair. Was 42 seconds clear of Leclerc at one stage at that same point, so that's a gap that's disappeared pretty quickly. That was a very lonely phase of the race for him, is what I've got here, but really not much doing for Bottas in 15th. Zhou pitted end of lap 12 for fresh mediums. He started on the soft, so that's why the stop had to be quite early. Lap 36, he was cut well adrift, 46 seconds behind Ocon ahead. At that stage, both drivers pitted 3 times. In the end, they pitted 4 times, so lots of times through the pits for them. And he ended the race 36.4 seconds behind Sergio Perez. So if Bottas had a sort of around lap 36, a lonely phase of the race, Zhou Guanyu had a very lonely race, full stop. So not much doing for Sauber. I'm sure Pascal will pop in with some info that I've missed in a moment, or a wrap up as our resident Sauber fan. But yeah, what have you got in your notes, Stuart, on Sauber? It's always I think they're the team we struggle with the most weekends, aren't they?
Yeah, and despite how bright green they are, they're one of the most visible teams in terms of telling a story. I think so. Bottas, I think, lacked pace, but had a fairly normal strategy, the same as most people around him. Medium inters when it was raining properly, and then softs. So I think that's just his pace, and at least Leclerc managed to get past him. If he'd got stuck behind Bottas the whole race, then that would have been an even worse story for Leclerc. Zhou, I think, was just bad strategy after bad strategy for him, which is why he was just so far behind. He started on the softs, which I think was madness, because I think that first stint was always going to be, we know rain's coming. We're not entirely sure. We think it's going to come. Well, it sort of came about. Hang on, what we're saying, about 20 laps in, but only a little bit. So they weren't sure it could have come later. So you kind of want to be able to have a stint you can stretch out, which you couldn't do with the soft. So I think with the forecast available, you kind of knew you were going to have to make a stop before you made your interstop. So they were forced to move from softs to mediums. They then also jumped too early to inters, like the Leclerc and Perez is. So they did 2 inter stints and then finally got onto the dry tyres at the end. So just Zhou was stopping constantly due to just poor strategy, really. So didn't have anything to fight with. He probably wouldn't have ended up in the points, but he wouldn't have ended up 36 seconds behind the second to last person if they'd have put him on something a bit more competitive today.
Thank you, Pascal, for the super chat and for your words on Sauber as our resident Sauber analysis, we'll say. Why not? Or analyst. Analyst? Is that a thing? Analyst. There we go. We got there in the end. Thank you, Pascal, for your support as well. We'll love heart that one. Says, cracking race today. Not much pace again in race trim for Sauber. Beat a Red Bull, so got to enjoy the small things in life. Fair enough. Can't wait for Hulkenberg to be in the car next season. He is on fire at the moment. He absolutely is. Thank you very much as well, again, for your super chat. But yeah, good point. Beat a Red Bull. It's something, isn't it? So, yeah. Positives where you can. And last, and I suspect really very much least, Alpine, Ocon finished P16, Inter's on end of lap 19, lap 22 abandoned that plan and moved to the softs. Did you hear that, Ferrari? He pitted for the Inter's on lap 19, it didn't work, so they abandoned the plan on lap 22 and moved to softs. And actually he was only a minute behind Leclerc, so maybe both strategies were wrong, who knows. And Pierre Gasly, photo wise, screw it. My picture of Pierre Gasly is that of him talking to Carlos Sainz in the driver parade. They were the highlights of his Sunday. Pit at the end of the formation, that problem with the car, retired, suspected gearbox issue. Misery for Pierre Gasly. At least Ocon started the race and finished it, I suppose. That's probably my highlights of Alpine's day. But yeah, sort of back to, sort of had a pretty a fairly decent run, actually, in the last few races. Sort of started back in Monaco with 10th place. Then they've had double points finishes in Canada and Spain, and then a point again in Austria. Fair to say, back down to earth with a bit of a bump for Alpine, I would say.
Yeah, really bad weekend for them, considering how much the story of their season had been their sort of ascent. Gasly had a nightmare weekend all round, really, just not to be spoken of, I guess. Which is a shame for him. Hopefully a bit of a one-off one. Didn't suit the circuit. Didn't suit. I haven't really kept an eye on what this Alpine is really like in when it's not dry. Maybe that's something to keep an eye on, really, because bad qualifying, bad race. I mean, Ocon's race was still bad strategy. He managed to make the softs go all the way to lap 19, and I suppose because he started on the softs, all they could do was, I guess, make a gamble on inters, considering where he was in the race anyway. If you know what I mean, like the tires they were gonna have to change tires anyway, so they may as well have tried out the inters, and if it works, they would have been heroes and maybe got themselves up into the points or something. I could see why they did that, but as you said, they did realize it was the wrong decision and went back to the medium tires again. So tricky day in the office for Alpine. I think they'll put themselves back together again and come back next week or 2 weeks, whenever the hell the next race is, 2 weeks time, and do a better job of it, because we know they're better than this now.
Yeah, they had an upturn in form, didn't they? So hopefully they can bounce back in Hungary. Scene of Ocon's win a few years ago, of course. So maybe some positivity there for them. Might be a bit of a way off a win this time around, though, but we'll see. Pole position went to George Russell, as we know. Fastest lap was Carlos Sainz, and driver of the day was Lewis Hamilton. That's the final points to round off. But we are going to finish running through the field there and come to a bit of Q&A. So if you have any questions, please do drop them in chat. Whilst you're doing that, Stuart's already said it in chat, we are 51 away from 300 likes, which is unheard of when we're live. So please do drop a like before we get to Q&A properly. That'd be massively appreciated. Let's try and get that to 300 before we end the stream. That'd be brilliant. And subscribe as well if you are new. Lots to come this season. We've got Hungary in a couple of weeks, and then Belgium, then it's a summer break, and then off we go again for the final stage of the season, which could be quite exciting. So yes, get your questions in. And you can also do super chats if you'd like to. You don't have to. I will always try and get you in chat. But Lyle's done one. Thank you very much, mate. He says Perez should go to Audi to stay in F1 and reboot. Thank you very much for your super chat, mate. We might come to that in just a moment. But yeah, likes and subscribes and all of that juicy, good stuff. Did you have a driver of the day, Stuart, this week? I actually think there's a few drivers that are going to be mixed in there. But the last few weeks with the decisions on driver of the day, I've not totally agreed. But I think today, given the conditions, given the emotion behind it as well, I sort of agree with the Lewis Hamilton one. But you've got to throw, Nico Hulkenberg, for example, in there as well.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I'm half-minded to Hulkenberg it, but it's hard not to give it to Lewis, isn't it? I mean, he did everything right, really. He made the strategy work. He felt the conditions. He pushed that car as hard as he could to get that win, and it's been such a long time since he's had something like this to celebrate. I think it's well worth giving it to him today, even though both of us and the official result agree, which is normally something we try and avoid.
Yeah, it's tricky, isn't it? Because I think Verstappen drove very well today to get P2. Struggled a little bit early on. Yeah, I think a lot of drivers deserve credit for their drives today because difficult conditions. Quite a few people in chat agreeing with Lewis as the pick. So there we go. If you go in Nico, it's Lewis or Nico, as Pascal says. Piastri says Mario, that's a good shout as well. Piastri drove well today. Not his fault with the strategy, really, was it? I suppose you could argue. Warren actually says Lewis, Nico, then Piastri. So I think that's fair enough. And I think Bart says Sargeant driver of the day. To be honest, low key did quite well. I wouldn't give him driver of the day given what happened ahead in the other drives, but I think he deserves, again, a nod for his weekend overall. I think he drove really, really well. Thank you to Vesk as well for your super chat. Says, still we rise. My favourite drivers are Lewis and Charles, and I'm not a Ferrari fan. Everybody is a Ferrari fan, but I guess I'll have to learn to be delusional. Yeah. Yeah, it's going to be fun. You'll enjoy it next year. You definitely will. Dave says Piastri. The Max says Stoff. We have to get Stoff in there somewhere, of course. But yeah, lots of love there for Kevin N says Gasly gets my vote for being smart enough to give up straight away. There you go. Fair enough. Questions in chat, and we'll answer a few before we finish up today. Won't be many today because we're already at an hour and 40, I think, with the stream taking off the countdown. So won't be too much longer. So yes, any questions would be appreciated. But yeah, I think great weekend overall. I can't really fault it. I think even practice this weekend because of the mixed conditions made it interesting. Qualifying was great. Race was great. It's been really happy with that. Really, really happy. And you guys agree. You've rated the Grand Prix. 83% say great, 13% say good, average okay, 2%. So the one vote on bad has gone. It doesn't count as a percent anymore. So there you go. Quite cool. Where do you think George would have finished? Says Dave Cox. Where do you think George would have finished? I feel he had podium probably. I'm not sure he'd have had enough for the win. I think Hamilton just had it today. Once he got in the lead, I think Bono said, didn't he, afterwards in an interview with Ted, that once Hamilton had got the lead and told him to shut up over the radio, he knew that he was never going to let it go. So, Bono knows him better than anybody in F1, so we'll have to listen to him there. But I think Russell could have been on the podium today. I think we said that earlier, didn't we, Stuart?
Yeah, I think quite easily, especially if it had. Well, I was going to say, especially if he picked the right tyres, but again, he was stuck between a soft and a hard, really not ideal. But yeah, I think he could have at least fought for a podium. Maybe if he'd had stopped for that final stint a lap earlier, maybe to get the jump and a bit of an undercut, if he'd have been allowed to do that. Yeah, I think the win was probably out of reach by the positioning he got from that first pit stop stack. But putting if he was into position to put a bit of pressure on Hamilton, maybe, I don't know. I don't think he would have scared Hamilton off the road at any point. No.
Muffy says this is the first race I've watched live and I chose a good one. I'm a fairly new F1 fan. You did choose a good one. We've had some stinkers this year. Thank God you didn't watch those. You'd never be back. Yeah, no, it was a good race. It was a really, really enjoyable, definitely. I think Michael got asked a question earlier on Ocon replacing Sargeant mid-season and going to Alpine, some kind of thing to be negotiated there. Well, I wanted to sort of get back to this because the last I read, again, it's only rumours, but the last I read was that Ocon to Haas for next year was done and would be announced in the next few weeks, if not next week, this coming week. And that was a done deal, and he's going to be Behrman's teammate. So I'm struggling. I sort of understand the point. Alpine aren't really, the relationship between Ocon and Alpine isn't exactly brilliant right now. They might want to test Doohan for next year because they're going to be having to make a decision on their driver for next season. So I can kind of see the sense around letting Ocon go to replace Sargeant at Williams if Williams want to do that, and then giving Doohan the rest of the year alongside Gasly to kind of assess him for next year. But if Ocon has signed for Haas, I'm not really sure I can see him then going to Williams for 6 months if he's going to Haas at the end of the year. It doesn't make a lot of sense to me. I don't know what you think about that, Stuart.
No, yeah, I tend to agree with everything you said there, to be honest, and don't have too much to add. I think you've got to let the season play out, and I just don't think it makes any sense to be moving. No, I mean, I can understand if you got a young driver that you probably want to be in that seat somehow, but you need to kind of get some track time in there, which is very precious at the moment. But I think you need to stick that to FP1 at the moment. I just think it makes the most sense. And they're still at a point now where they're fighting for points, so they're going to need to have people who can bring those points home, who they can rely on as long as they're nowhere near each other on track.
Warren says, would you agree McLaren have left 50 points on the table through the triple header, mostly through strategy? That's a good question, isn't it? They've left a lot on the table. So Norris felt they should have won today. So he finished third. So that's 10 points, isn't it? Straight away on the table. Austria, had that not happened up at turn 3, I think Norris would have got through eventually. So that's that's 25 points there, isn't it? So that's 35 points from the last 2 for Norris alone. But that's not strategy, that last one, to be fair. That Austria one isn't strategy. Was Canada, they thought they were going to win that one, didn't they, with the safety car? pitting too late for the safety car and losing a lap behind that cost them. So that's another 7 points. Spain, I can't remember Spain, Stuart. I mean, that's not the triple header, but I'm trying to remember Spain.
Spain, he finished very close behind. There's an interesting... it gets more complicated, I think, as well with the points, because if made a better strategy call in Canada and finished first with Max second, not only is he gaining 7 points, Max is losing 7 points, so it's actually a 14-point swing. Then you get into complicated calculations. But I don't know if that's what, I can't remember who asked the question, meant or not. Spain, it was very close at the end. He was chasing Max down. I don't know if that came down to strategy really, though.
Yeah, I'm not. Yeah, I think I don't know about the number 50, but they've left a lot. And with Perez struggling, come the end of the season, you know, we're going to look back at this triple header potentially and sort of go, oh, just think if they brought him in when they should have done in at Silverstone, would they have won the constructors? And again, you know, I like making this point, but it's all ifs and buts when you get to that point, isn't it? But you do tend to look back over a season and go, oh, if that hadn't have happened. As people like to point out, you go back to all that controversy around Racing Point, as they were, I think, where they got the points deduction, which actually cost them a place in the championship, and that's big money. So you know, we do look back and say these things. So that's yeah.
And I think crucially, I think, like, I don't know, if you go back to not the controversial bit, but like 2021, you'd be like, you know, Max lost points here, Lewis lost points here. You know, if you look, and if they both look back, they'd be like, we both lost points over the course of the season, and it could have swung either way. I think crucially this season, you could say, yeah, looking at McLaren, Lando Norris, or whoever, yeah, there's lots of points where they've fallen short of their potential and lost points. Whereas if you look at Verstappen, I don't think you could say that. You know, I don't think at the end of the season they'll be saying, oh, but on balance, we, you know, both of us had opportunity to get more points and we lost it. Whereas I think Max Verstappen is closer to maximizing what the points that are on the table for him and the team, I think, if that makes sense.
Maximizing Verstappen.
Exactly.
I do. There is a part of me does chuckle as well, by the way, and I know it's based on performance at the moment, but I do sort of look at the championship table and I laugh at us talking about McLaren as the big title contenders to Red Bull in the constructors, but they're actually still behind Ferrari. Just forget Ferrari aren't there anymore. Bless them. That's all I can say. Vesk says, where's it gone? It was a question, actually. It's gone again. Is Max to Mercedes plausible at all? Toto said there's a 33% chance he may be clowning. Yeah. Toto said 33.3% Antonelli, 33.3% Sainz, 33.3% Verstappen. Sainz is back on the table, by the way, apparently, for Mercedes, so he should never have been off the table, frankly. I stand by what I said yesterday. I think we said it before, Stuart, so we're not getting into it too much, but I think Antonelli to Williams makes more sense to me. Sainz to Mercedes, if Verstappen doesn't want to make the move, and that's what really ought to be happening. For Antonelli's career, more than anything, that's a lot of pressure to go from what has been, apart from his winning the sprint on Saturday, a difficult start to his time in F2, to then just suddenly throw him in a Mercedes. Seems bonkers to me, but they'll do what they want to do. But on the Verstappen thing, I've always been very dismissive of it, but I have to say, the longer it goes on, and looking at Mercedes starting to turn the corner, and all the disruption at Red Bull and Adrian Newey leaving, there is a bit of me that thinks, probably less than 33%, that makes me think, do you know he could? Maybe not for next year, but perhaps for 2026, which will give them even more of a headache, I think, actually, for who they want in that car for next season if it's only 1 year. But I wouldn't be surprised if perhaps more serious conversations have taken place in the last few weeks than maybe they did 3 months ago. But I'm still expecting Max at Red Bull next season alongside somebody. And then I'd still go Sainz to Mercedes, honestly.
Yeah, it's tricky, honestly. I think my position is it's definitely not off the table. And I agree with you, it probably won't be for next year. I say I wouldn't be surprised. I guess I would be a bit surprised, but I wouldn't be flabbergasted if he did something like Alonso did in 2005, where he announced if Verstappen announced at the end of this year that he's got a 2026 deal with Mercedes, so
Mm.
he'll do one more year with Red Bull, and then like if something like that happened, if I think because I think definitely the Verstappen family have become more uncomfortable with Red Bull than they were, and I think it would be a shot across the bows to sort of say we're leaving you, but we'll see out another. I don't know. And the Antonelli thing also is that there's so much talk about Antonelli going to Mercedes next year. It's wild to me, considering if you look back at how Mercedes like to do things, they took 3 years to move George Russell across to that team when he was always going to be their plan.
Didn't take
Like
Ocon, took Bottas rather than Wehrlein, didn't they, when they had a seat open?
Yeah, just very, very cautious with that seat, and now they're like, we've got to get this youngster in. Yeah, interesting. I'll interested to see how that pans out.
Yeah, I what was I going to say? I was going to make a really great point, and you're all going to be amazed. What I was going to say now. No, that was it. We have to remember as well that, you know, when these rumours started 3, 4, 5 months ago about Verstappen to Mercedes, it all sounded bonkers. But I've got to say, whilst I still think he will win the title this year, the talk that we were having 4 months ago about this year's title and next year's title being nailed on, that might not be the case anymore. So that might make him go, oh, actually, maybe he does feel there's a bit of decline there. Maybe he thinks maybe now is the time to make the switch because they're going to have, you know, works. I know that Red Bull building their own engine, but they've never built that before. Yes, they've got some help from Ford with the electronics and things like that, but they've never worked on their own power unit from scratch before. So there's a lot of gamble there, whereas Mercedes are proven through rule changes to get it right. So he might think, actually, maybe a move now, while Mercedes are on the up and Red Bull are they've got competition, ready for 2026, might tempt him because that, you know, we were talking, 10 races ago, Stuart, about this year's title and next year's title being a foregone conclusion, and I don't think they are anymore.
Mm-hmm.
I still think he will win this year, but it's not going to be as comfortable as we suspected, and next year could be even closer than this year. So that might now actually completely change his feeling, and that's just, I mean, CPB keeps saying this, so I'll read it again. Max to Audi, the timing is perfect. I'm not quite sure on that one. I can't see Max taking a drive at Sauber for next season. I think he'd be very frustrated there. But just things have shifted since this rumour first started, I guess, is my point. So I'm going to go with watch this space because that's the way it is. But I'd be more surprised if he made the switch than if he stayed at Red Bull. Let's put it that way. It's probably the last thing on that.
It really is quite astonishing how much the narrative has changed since the beginning of the season. Like, we were so sure how this season was going to go and how next season was going to go, and the fact that no one really knows has left a door open for Max to start making some interesting decisions around his career. And you know, a lot of other team bosses have said a lot of people from Red Bull have put their CVs on their desk. So I don't know how much of that is chatter just to destabilize things, but if that is the case and Max is aware that there's been a little bit of a exodus of staff, then that's when you start to think, is this really the place I need to be for the long term? But yeah, we'll see. I think the point is, there is definitely a lot more scope for Max making decisions to move than there used to be.
It's going to be fast. I mean, of the projects for 2026, the one I'm most interested in is Aston Martin, I must say. With, you know, the Honda power unit, all of these people they're getting in, the potential possibility, maybe perhaps move of Adrian Newey. They're a project that I'm quite excited about for the future, and that's why I think Alonso's sticking around. He's not daft. He can sense things, can't he? So, we'll see what happens next season. But the driver market could still come alive. It's not been bad. It's been, to be fair, it's been much better than last year where nothing happened, but it could still go crazy in the second half of the year. But I think there's going to be a lot of pieces should start falling into place soon. But I thought Sainz had the key to the market, but I do wonder if actually Verstappen is the key to the market here. I wonder if once he comes out and says, yes, I'm staying, like definitively, not sort of I've got a contract for next year, like we hear from drivers. If he definitively comes out and says, I am here next year, then suddenly you're going to see Sainz is signed up somewhere and everybody else falls into place. Because as long as Verstappen is umming and ahhing, you'd be mad to sign somebody else up.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. Do you think the only reason that Sainz is still floating around is because team bosses aren't convinced that Verstappen is nailed down and they're just poking at that possibility?
Yeah, only Mercedes though. I don't know if that's like a weird way, but I can't. I'm not convinced. I know Audi. Some people might think that like CPB thinks that's a good idea, but I don't think Audi is an option because I don't think they want to bring somebody in 26. They want somebody at Sauber next year to settle in, and Max ain't going to take that. He's not going to go to Williams or Alpine or anywhere like that. So I think it is just Mercedes. But yeah, I think you're right in the point that I guess, yeah, all those team bosses will have that in their mind because ultimately what Mercedes decides will decide who they've got left on the market, won't it? I suppose is the way I'd respond to that because if Max goes to Mercedes, then suddenly Sainz is your best option. Whereas if Max stays at Red Bull and Mercedes go for Sainz, suddenly then your best options are who are your best options? That's a good question, actually, isn't it? Yeah, nobody. But no, there's a few drivers out there, isn't there, that could make a move. It's going to be really interesting, but. Yeah, I don't know. It's this driving market. I can't call it. Plus, I don't know if the press, the media are starved of stories, Stuart, from last year's miserable silly season. But we do seem to have a different rumor every day. I mean, somebody said in chat earlier that this year's silly season is wild. This week has been start of the week. Ricciardo was out of a seat. By the end of the week, he's possibly in a Red Bull. So it's been that kind of year, hasn't it?
Yeah, weird old time we live in.
Alice says, don't think they would have signed Checo if they weren't sure of Max. If Max was staying, I suppose, yeah. Minty says, I got all teary. I don't do tears as the national anthem blasted out. Hamilton's mum wouldn't let go of him. Smashing, that's a great word, smashing. I said it to Stuart, Hannah Waddingham, the national anthem. I would still rate Hans Zimmer higher. I think the whole Glee thing was brilliant last week. What felt like Glee. But Hannah Waddingham absolutely nailed the national anthem. And it's quite a miserably dreary, horrible national anthem anyway. So she did a great job. And I've come to the conclusion that if there is a God, it is Hannah Waddingham. Because there is nothing she can't do.
Agree.
But I think we're going to wrap it up. If we're talking about Hannah Waddingham being God, I think we've come too far in the stream. It's probably time to end it there.
I have one question for you.
Go on then.
What did you think of the movie trailer?
The trailer was better than the name. Can you remember when they rebranded the National Lottery to Lotto? It feels a bit
Terrible.
like that. Yeah, no, it's...
It certainly is a film.
What do you think of the trailer? It's certainly a trailer. It just looks like a movie version of Drive to Survive.
That's what I thought.
Yeah. Even Gunther Steiner made a brief appearance, and it feels like it was it Brad Pitt in World War Z?
Yeah.
Yeah. That whole film to me felt like just a film that was designed to make Brad Pitt the hero so he can massage his ego for 2 hours or whatever. And I feel like this film might be the same thing. I'm not anti-Brad Pitt before anyone starts accusing me of being a Matt Damon fanboy or something. We've come too far in this stream. We've come way too far. No, I'm not. I can't say I'm looking forward to the film, but I will watch it. I just think the name's dreadful. And Ted Kravitz nailed it yesterday, as Ted Kravitz always does. It's... what is it? What did he say? He said something like, we're going to we're off to the cinema to watch F1. Oh, is the F1 at the cinema? No, the film F1. There's an F1 film. Yeah, what's it about? F1. Oh, is F1 at the cinema? It's crazy.
Terrible name. Because it makes it feel like it's a corporate entity, like a sort of one of those, like when FIFA made their own film. They didn't call it FIFA, but it was just a big kind of like branding exercise. Yeah, it's not the best, and it's the F1 logo as well. So it just looks like a sort of corporate self-made thing that that mustache man has put out, who used to run F1.
I would also like to point out that it's a story, isn't it, about a former F1 driver returns. Brad Pitt is 60 now. I know Fernando Alonso is 302. But that it still seems unlikely that a 60-year-old is going to... It all feels a little bit... But then I suppose, he doesn't look 60, does he? I probably look older than he does, to be fair.
And isn't the plot of Driven that a kind of washed-out old driver returns to help a young gun win for the team?
I've never seen it, honestly.
Oh, it's terrible. You should watch it.
Oh yeah, it's terrible. You should watch it. That should sell it. I take it you're not doing the movie poster and the taglines for the new F1 film. Then it's terrible. Come see it. I will say this: if you want to watch an F1 film, by the way, Rush, Hunt versus Lauda. That's a cracking film. I'd highly recommend that. But yeah, I will watch Driven because it's awful just for you. We are the chatter on Brad Pitt facelifts now, so I think we have definitely come too far now. We've gone over the cliff. With Hannah Waddingham is God. Sean isn't a Matt Damon fanboy. Driven's terrible. You should definitely watch it. And that's it, really. So yeah, we'll wrap it up there, Stuart. Before we get on to politics, good God, no. I've had enough of that over the last 6 weeks. Thank you for joining me. It's been a pleasure. Hopefully, Hungary is as cracking as it has been over the last few years, and is even better than the British Grand Prix. But I'm leaving this stream very happy with the way F1 is at the moment. It seems competitive. It is competitive. And we've just had a great race as well, and I'm looking forward to what will be the second half of the season. Still a lot of races to go.
First season I watched fully, there would have only been 4 races left at this point.
Yeah. Now we've got a whole other season, basically.
Yeah, strap
Feels
in.
like it. But yeah, it's been great, Stuart. I'm sure I'll talk to you soon.
Yes, it's been. I'm glad we had a real cracker to chat about today. So yes, I'll see you in a couple of weeks, I'm sure.
Yes, absolutely.
Bye for now.
Cheers, bye. Thank you to Stuart. Thank you to all of you guys as well for tuning in. A pleasure to have you with us, as always, of course. Before you go, please do leave a like. We're nearly at 300. We're 14 away. Come on, we can do that while I'm signing off. Let's get that to 300. That'd be absolutely fantastic. Thank you, everyone, for your super chats this evening and your support. Just check that I've got everybody I have indeed. So thank you for all your super chats. That's fantastic. Really generous of you. And your support is always appreciated. And of course, thank you for your subs as well. Don't forget to subscribe if you are new. Lots coming up over the next few weeks. Hungary and Belgium ahead of the summer break. Thank you very much, Cadenza, for getting the super chat in right at the end there. I appreciate that. So I love you guys. I love this chat. Thanks for a great couple of hours. Thank you very much for your super chat and your support. I love these streams. They're my favourite ones that we do. I like that we changed them a little bit earlier in the year to try them, but I'm glad we're back at these now. That's the best time to react, and great to spend the evening with you. Next week, I don't know what's happening. I cannot say any more than this. Things are in limbo at the minute. I'm very much in limbo with the channel, but I'd like to get something out this coming week. It's all going to depend on what happens with meetings and other things, but leave that with me. I will let you know at some point. Well, but you'll know when the video goes out or doesn't go out, I suppose, is the point. If I can't get a video out, I might just randomly go live, see if Jonty's free or something, or if Stuart wants to come back on and we'll talk nonsense, but we'll see if we can do it. But it's all going to come down to what's going on behind the scenes. But I will definitely be back for the preview for the Hungarian Grand Prix in a couple of weeks' time. There'll be the qualifying watch along as well, and of course the race reaction, and the same for Belgium, one of my favourite races of the year, so cannot wait for that. But as ever, thank you for watching. I've been Sean. This has been the F1 Word, and until next time, goodbye.